I'm sorry, I wasn't watching the clock as closely as I should have done. Tonight's meeting, we have just hearings, but they're interesting hearings. But the meeting starts with public comment. If there's anyone who wishes to comment on something that's not on the agenda, any topic you'd like, now is the time. And if you wish to do that, or we'll be speaking later, please always go over here to the microphone, because that's what connects us to FCTV. So when you get there, give your name and state what it is you're speaking on. So is there anyone who wants to make a comment on something not on the agenda? No. Okay, then let's start. Paul, minutes?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the minutes of September 10th, 2024, as corrected.
As corrected. So second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
However, the minutes of September 17th have not been received to date, so they're tabled.
Oh, okay, when we get to them. So let's, we have a public hearing that's being continued, it's open again, on Home to Home Development LLC definitive plan application to create an 11-lot subdivision at 0, 2, and 20 Lewis Street and 0 Bayberry Lane. And speaking for that,
Hi, I'm Paul Seberg from Grady Consulting.
thank you.
So since we met with the board last, I'm sorry. Since we met with the board last, there was some remaining comments from the town engineer and stormwater peer review consultant. We submitted revised plans and stormwater calculations addressing those comments from the reviews. Revised plans and stormwater calculations were submitted electronically on September 3rd. And we've received comments from the peer review consultant from CEI regarding the stormwater review, and we've addressed all their comments. One of the remaining items was a separate stormwater permit application, which we need to file, but that won't change the review process. They won't have to do another review for that. The initial review will be sufficient for that. We received comments from the town engineer on September 17th. The majority of the comments have been addressed. There were a few minor remaining comments that we've since addressed and submitted revised plans on September 20th, which we won't be discussing tonight from what I understand, but you do have them. Overall, there hasn't been any real significant changes from the last design that was presented to the board. But I'd be happy to go through some of the remaining comments that we just initially addressed with the last submittal if you'd like, or I can turn it over to questions to the board.
Okay, I was a little surprised when I looked at the materials today, thinking, wow, this is a lot of materials that were requested from you, and I was wondering, well, why didn't you do it to begin with? But Jed has since told me that this is, for subdivision approval, this is usually a process like this. It's an iterative process. It goes back and forth, so it's just moving along, apparently, a normal course of events. So there'll be another hearing on this afterwards, because there are more things to look at. But do you want to go through some of the things that you've responded to? Because I'm assuming the people who are here because of this subdivision. Is that correct? Yes. Pretty much, yeah. So do you want to go through that?
Yeah, sure. So do you want me to go through the most recent response from the review consultant, the review engineer?
Yes.
Yeah,
please.
so that would be the September 17th review.
Would that cover the things that are the submission requirements for the conformance list with the subdivision plan regulations?
September 17th, the latest engineering referral is from September 17th. I would recommend that the applicant go through that.
That is it, yeah. So
And that's included in your
That's from
packets.
our engineering department?
Yes, it is.
Or peer, our engineering?
So there are two referrals.
Okay.
There's from our engineering division, which is dated September 17th.
Okay,
And then there's an additional review from a peer engineer that goes through the engineering division for the stormwater. And that's only for the stormwater management permit.
okay, and these are two certified engineers, so they're professionals doing their job.
Correct.
So if you would.
Perfect. So one of the comments was the planning board should determine if traverse tables are required or if relief should be granted from the requirements. We provided traverse tables and our survey calculations of our traverse. So you should have all that information. Planning board should determine if an environmental impact statement is adequate, requires revisions, or if relief should be granted. We've submitted an environmental impact statement for the planning board's review.
Got it?
That's in your packet. Yep,
It's in the packet. The first one I come
This
to,
big
actually,
thick one we got right here?
that's the one.
yeah, on which I have a question, is if the requirements are met for access to Lot 11, or if improvements are required to Old Bayberry Lane, and the engineer is deferring that to the board if improvements are required. Would you comment on that, Jed?
Sure. I don't recall exactly when this was, so I apologize. But we did find in the file, in the past, a previous planning board had gone through a determination of access process for Old Bayberry and had cleared that road for adequate access and, in fact, released a bond that was in place at the time. I can provide more detail perhaps at the next meeting, whenever you continue the applicant to clarify that. I just don't have all those details at the top of my head. But what I do remember was that they deemed it to be adequate access back in, I think it was 2007, roughly.
Okay, and then the next series of comments are on the stormwater review.
I have a question about the environmental impact statement if we're asking questions, as the previous thing, we
we're
went
just
by
gonna-
that.
I thought I'd just go in the
Okay,
order
you
that
go-
they're here, if we get to it.
We just did.
Oh,
Okay, I thought I heard him say it, excuse me.
I don't think so. You can follow along right here in this.
I know,
Oh,
I just heard him say. I'll wait till the end.
I'm sorry, are you looking at the August, the June 17th letter, or the September 17th letter?
and it appears that all the materials requested for stormwater were submitted and not questioned any further.
Right, so if I may, the stormwater management permit, as you know, will go through the engineering division. So part of this process includes the applicant working on that permit concurrently with the definitive plan, or you can condition it as part of a third step in the process. So this applicant has actually worked with that first option and is nearly there. In fact, the latest revision included clearance to submit the actual stormwater management permit. So they've met all the requirements, is what I'm trying to say, for stormwater management. But that is new material that was filed very recently. So that's sort of a prelude to what we'll talk about at the next meeting. But I believe what you'd want to address, Madam Chair, is this engineering division referral. And there are green, orange, or yellow, red, and blue comments
Yeah, those are
in
all
bold.
here.
And I believe that's what the applicant's going through at this point.
Yes, I left out the green comments since they were
Addressed.
determined that they were
Yeah,
addressed. So I started with the orange, yellow colored comments.
Yes, I know, but before we get there, we can come back to that, because I found things in this. Okay, the first that comes up on this is whether or not 2 copies of surveyor's certificate for the center line stationing of stakes. Working from this, that's in red. So that's a hanging issue.
Okay, so we want to stake the center line of the roadway at this point? And-
So, yeah, so that's an open question for the board. Would you like to do a group site visit? Or would you like to do it individually? And in order to do so, they would need to stake it for you so that you can see exactly where this new road's going to be.
What's the sense of the board
Could do it individually.
That'd be
individually?
easier. Okay.
Yeah, it'd be much easier. So does that mean it needs to be staked?
Yeah, that way you can see exactly where the road is going to be, at least the center line of the road.
Okay, and others could see it also.
Correct.
Might be helpful.
Could we ask them to stake the 500-foot mark on the length of the street?
Sure, absolutely.
Because that's what we're
Right.
talking about. We
Yep.
might as well stand on it and see what it looks like.
Right, they've requested a waiver for that, but we have no action on it.
You'll want to just arrange when that staking would be able to be done, so that then we can notify you folks that you can go visit. And then, of course, the abutters would have the opportunity as well, or at least be able to see it from the street. That is private property.
Well, we were thinking of continuing to the 8th, but perhaps after the 8th would be better. After the 11th would be better.
I would
Well,
think,
Continue the 8th or the 22nd.
if it's possible to have it, do you think it would be
We can-
possible to stake it between now and the
Yes.
8th?
Yes, we can probably get out there by the end of this week, the
Great.
beginning of next week, if needed.
Would that work? And then,
Does that work for everybody?
That's fine.
Yeah.
We can do that.
So sometime toward the 8th, the center line of the street will be staked, and people can go take a look at it and see where it is, and the 500-foot
Planning
mark
board
will be
staff, right?
there.
What date? Today's?
Okay, moving forward. The next marked item is under the environmental impact statement, and we should be addressing, you need an environmental and economic impact statement, which you submitted, and I have not seen the document. Has anyone here had a chance to see the document?
so I'm not sure if the applicant has, so the item that you're referring to is the staff report that we put together, itemizing each one of your subdivision regulations and whether or not the application conforms or does not conform. What the applicant is trying to cover is the engineering referral, which has got the multicolored bold text. So we just gave the applicant a copy of the planning staff's referral or review, but you might want to just have them go through the engineering division's comments first, and then we can huddle back to the planning staff. Might give them a bit of opportunity to scramble and look through these comments. But I'll summarize very quickly. There were very few items that I noticed within your regulations that you need to address with the applicant. So there may be a handful of items that you want to just touch upon
I have a
this
couple
evening.
of questions along this issue.
Jim, go ahead.
What is the value of these lots? What price range are you gonna be selling them? How expensive these homes are gonna be on these lots? And the next question I'm following up is the impact it has on the neighborhood. I believe that is a requirement of the environmental impact study for you to provide us that.
Dan, do you have an idea of?
So 1.3 million to 1.6 million dollar homes?
Correct.
And
These,
what about there's also, I think you have to tell us where the impact of any runoff from the site of the neighboring ponds, either Great Pond or Green Pond, is there any measurable effect that this development will have on those ponds, either from the runoff or the septic systems?
So we'll be infiltrating almost all the water on site with the proposed infiltration system. The drainage basin is designed to infiltrate the 100-year storm event. So we're significantly reducing the runoff from the site with the proposed development. As far as the septic system, that will be a treatment system. We're gonna be proposing a Clean 2 treatment system.
Clean two?
Yeah, that's the type of treatment system used for nitrogen reduction.
So will that have an impact on the nitrogen loading of either Great Pond or Green Pond? Which water, is it Great Pond that this?
It's Great Pond,
Great-
that's
Great-
correct,
okay,
yep.
forget Green Pond, it's Great Pond. That's-
Yep.
Only goes one way. Downhill, yeah.
So the nitrogen loading, will meet the nitrogen loading requirements for the septic system within that area, that
Do you know
coastal
what
pond
the
overlay district.
Loading is. I mean, I'm wondering if it has an impact on nitrogen at all on that pond.
Well, a conventional septic system would have some nitrogen impacts, but the treatment system would meet the requirements. I don't know off the top of my head what they are, but typically it's around like 10 milligrams.
we don't do individual septic systems, we only get involved in big ones like that.
Right, yeah, so this is, the town requires the shared system for a subdivision.
So it meets the town requirements, but
Yeah,
we
it-
don't know exactly what that is?
Not at this time. We are working on the septic design.
I'm not sure either, but
Yeah.
we do keep track of the daily loading on all the ponds. It's a number that some people are familiar with, so I.
Right,
thought
we'll
we
be
could
submitting a septic design to the
Just
Board
relate
of
it to that
Health.
number so that people
Yeah.
could understand it.
Right.
That's all I'm talking about.
Yep.
So the answer to my question was, and how about the service, other services, as far as schools and other services? Is this going to have an impact on town services wide? I believe that's another appropriate question for this kind of size subdivision.
Yeah, I forget what we estimated in our
How many
report
people are
here.
going to be living in these $1.2 million homes?
It's actually answered here. They anticipate 3 to 4 people per dwelling, and of these, 16 might be expected to be of school age, 5 to 16 years of
Okay.
age, have minimal, in their estimation, minimal, if any, additional requirements for transportation, classroom space, et cetera.
Thank you. I was asking
It's
him.
here. They answered.
Okay, that's all, that's what I was interested in.
Charlotte, I have a question. I know nothing about this clean tube treatment system. Does it affect only nitrogen, or does it affect as well phosphorus, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. We're working with the manufacturers of the Clean 2 at the moment, to working on the design as far as sizing of the tanks, et cetera. So we can definitely get that information to you.
Thank you.
Could I ask you, is the drainage likely to run off into anybody else's land as it's going downhill?
So currently, if I can point to the screen here. The drainage runs basically from this side of the site back to this low point in the corner. There's some drainage that would run to the middle of lot 2 approximately. With the proposed drainage basin here in the low point of the lot, and also our drainage system with the roadway, the runoff from here is now gonna be collected by the roadway and then discharged to the infiltration basin out back. And everything that's flowing over here overland will now flow to the drainage basin as well. And that drainage basin is designed to handle the 100-year storm event, so it will fully retain that 100-year storm event and infiltrate it on site. Nothing's proposed as an outlet for this drainage basin. We do have an emergency overflow structure, but based on the design, it needs enough freeboard within the drainage system to retain everything. in the 100-year storm.
Are you following that? Is there anyone here who would like to question that?
Basically half of the area.
Sir, if you wish to speak, you need to come to the microphone.
Peter Sarkinen, Lot 20, for Babylon, which is about in the center of Lot 5, I believe. The road of Avalon goes up from Sherwood, approximately my lot, almost 9 feet. The back lot of this property goes up almost another 10 feet or so to the back corner. So this corner lot, basically, on the top left corner, is where the lowest point of land is on that. So he's talking about bringing most of the drain water in behind one of the lots, so that lot can't use that property because it's actually drainage property, correct?
Right, there'll be a drainage easement out in the back corner.
Right. So you're taking care of 2/3 of the water going one way, so where's the other third of the water going into that far corner? Into the far corner, basically, is that another drainage area?
So this is the only drainage area. on
That's
site.
the only,
It's a
that's the only drainage area. Okay, so everything goes that one low spot,
Right.
which is only behind the house against Sherwood, which is only one lot away from the tributary that comes in.
I'm really supposed to be talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
could you address your comments here?
I'm
Please
sorry,
speak
ba-
so that we
basically,
can hear you.
What we're doing is we're taking all the runoff as far as water to the far top corner of the lot itself, of the property, which is abutting people that live on Shorewood,
Mhm.
which is only one lot away from the tributary, basically coming in as far as the salt water. So he's saying this is adequate as far as drainage for that area?
He's an engineer.
It's just a question.
I believe they're taking it to the low spot, and he's an
Okay.
engineer.
Okay. So there,
That's what he's supposed to do.
Okay.
Can't make it go the other way.
It's a question, that's all. I realize that. It's just, I know the lot itself, because I've lived there for almost 45 years in that area, so I know how everything runs off down the road and that kind of stuff, so. But it's just a basic question.
Madam Chair, if I may, perhaps the applicant can go to sheet 4 of 10 and show the public and the folks who are in the room what that stormwater looks like. So that sheet actually shows just the one above it.
So,
That's where your retention basin is located, in that top left corner.
and this sheet right here shows your tributary area. So this is the area that's contributing, flowing down to this low point. And then there's another area, number 2 here, which flows to this low point here. And essentially, we're collecting all of this, and it's now infiltrating into this basin, whereas before, it was just flowing over the site and discharging out here. Same right here. So we're collecting all this area right here and now routing it to our infiltration basin and infiltrating it on site. So we're gonna be significantly reducing the amount of runoff that was previously flowing off the site in this area here as well as this area here.
Hello, Joe Baker, 56 Old Bayberry. If you look at this in isolation, it looks pretty good. But as you know, there's another moderate housing plan going up right next to this. So my question is, what's the environmental impact, stormwater runoff, whatever, when both are considered? Because both are nominally getting ready to be approved.
Well, we can only deal with the one that's in front of us, and the claim is being made that it's going to take care of the runoff from that site. Is that right?
That's correct.
Does it? Thank you. Have you accommodated for what the runoff coming from the other one might be?
Well,
That developer would have to
we're
take
not
care of
dealing with that one right now.
That developer would have to deal with that.
Yeah, when they come, we can question them, but this development is taking care of its own runoff.
And they all do anyways, I mean.
Right.
Everybody has to
Each
maintain
on its own, yes.
runoff.
Lynn Cohen, 47 Old Bayberry. I'm the lot that's going to be across from 11. And I'm on well water. And I'm concerned, and hope we can address it. He's talking about the ones sort of on the cul-de-sac, but not necessarily 11. And I'm wondering how they're going to deal with septic waste from 11, because I'm on a well. And water drains down towards my property.
Could you address that, please?
Yes, our proposed septic system, the leaching field, is located over here, near the vicinity of number 20 Lewis Street, which would meet the required setbacks to any potable well in the area. That's a potable well, so you're on well water, is your drinking water source?
Only on well water.
Right, so we're not proposing any sort of septic system for Lot 11. The septic system's over here. There'll be a sewer line that runs from the house down to some sewer manholes, but there's no required setback for those to a well.
I think we discussed that at the last time, but it's
We did.
obviously a concern. It's here again. Are there any questions then about drainage and sewerage?
I'm Diane Gilroy, and I apologize if you already covered this, but is that leaching field or the drain, is that covered?
I can't hear you. Could you
Is that
speak
a
this way?
covered drainage area? It is? That's a yes.
Sorry, what do you mean by covered drainage?
Well, is it buried, is it open? I mean, maybe I'm thinking about the
It's,
mosquitoes and
It's a drainage
the-
basin. It's a basin. It's like,
Right.
it's a hole, basically. essentially.
Okay, all right, so that just makes me, because they've been spraying a lot for the mosquitoes and all the rest, there's just, not just the environmental impact from the septic, but also from all the chemicals that people put on their lawns, whether it's fertilizers or mosquito repellent or all of the rest. It is, a cumulative effect. And those are, fairly substantial lawn sites.
Well, one of the questions here, one of the issues here on the review is if the proposed subdivision has any probable detrimental effect on the ecology of the local area, and it's been answered here. Would you like to review your answer?
I'm sorry, which one is that? Which number is that one?
That is number 12. I wish these pages, there were numbers on the pages.
So as we discussed, the proposed drainage system will fully infiltrate the runoff on site from the roadway due to rainfall and snow melt, promoting recharge to the groundwater table. The majority of the site is currently cleared with tall grass and garden areas. There is minor tree clearing required for the development of the lots. The lots to the westerly side of the site and the drainage basin. The remainder of the site will be proposed lawn area. There will be minimal disruption to biological environment. It's unclear at the time what the owners of each individual lot will clear to and propose as lawn area. It depends on the owner. I mean, a lot of people don't want to maintain a large lawn area, so they may not be clearing much for each lot. It's kind of going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Well, and I don't think the town has any regulations on the area of the lot that would be receiving fertilizer. They request that people limit it, but I don't think there's a limit.
Not to my knowledge.
Only in coastal areas.
Right.
And Bourne Pond doesn't make this a coastal.
Like conservation gets
You need
involved.
buffer zones.
Yeah, so if
Buffer
if
zones,
it's,
not coastal areas. The whole town's a coastal area.
but it's like, it would be before, if it required conservation, then it
100
would.
and the 200-foot buffer.
Yeah.
We condition how much
My
area
only
they can
point was that
clear?
this will be a stagnant pool of water, as opposed to
I'm confused. Where are you referring to?
the
Corner.
In the upper left corner, that's going to be one of those catch basins. So at times, when there've been heavy rains, it will have a lot of water in it, and then it will drain.
How long, what's the percolation rate for that to drain down?
So the soils are very good in this area. It's less than 2 minutes an inch perk rate.
2 minutes an inch, okay.
Less than 2 minutes an
Less
inch
than 2
perk rate.
minutes an inch.
We were unable to saturate the soils during the perk testing.
Okay. Do you foresee stagnant water in that pond?
No, I forget what the exact, we're required to have full drain down within 72 hours for the basin. I forget how many hours it actually says in the stormwater report. There's the copies over there, but it's less than the 72-hour requirements. There's not going to be water pooled within that
Is
basin.
there any pooling water on the site now?
No, not that I'm aware of.
So Bob's question is, may we condition the amount that's turned into lawn?
Well, you can certainly have a conversation with the applicant to minimize the amount of tree clearing, and in fact, it's one of the items that I
Well,
wanted
it's
to bring to
apparently
your
mostly
attention.
grassland.
But you can see on, trying to remember what sheet shows it the best. There's a proposed limit of tree clearing, at least being shown on the plans.
Yeah, so we did a conceptual
Yeah,
tree clearing.
I think the
Just to
best
give
one
an
might be
idea.
utility. Yeah, right. So that, exactly, gives you an understanding as to where exactly the limit of tree clearing would exist. One of the questions that I had in the staff report was, there seems to be I'm assuming it's an open connection between Lot 11 and proposed, I think, Lot 8, yes. And so the question for the board through to the applicant would be, is there a reason to keep that open? Or is there an opportunity to close that off for privacy purposes, right? So it's essentially a corridor that I guess neighbors could share. But
Right
they
away?
may not be okay with that.
So the reason for this is there's just an existing path that runs through there. This is an
Right.
existing tree line now. So
Right.
likely they would just let that, grow in.
To create that privacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, that's
You-
what I would do.
Right. So, to the board, that might be something that you ask the applicant to show as a proposed tree line to close that off, to create the privacy, but you may not want to get into that level of detail. It's completely up to you.
Well, the suggestion that's made here in D is that the planning board may deem it necessary to get a consultant to review the environmental impact statement, to see if these issues really are going to be continuing and getting worse.
That's under your purview, if you'd like to look into that. I've reviewed it. I don't see the value in that. I wouldn't recommend that you do that, but it's completely up to you.
Okay, then, let's move on to the next section. I think we've done the stormwater. Why don't we go now to the section marked in yellow. Deferred to others, and most of that would be us. Do you see where that is?
Yes, I have it here in front of me.
Okay,
So I
great.
think I touched on the couple of the first items here. We've submitted the traverse tables that are mentioned. We provided a traverse table plan.
And it's saying if requested, and whether or not relief should be granted.
They submitted it.
It's already done?
Yep.
And what about 12?
They submitted that as well.
Well, this is that same environmental impact statement. We know we got the abutters list. Easement areas.
So with the latest revision, we did add, so the request was to provide easement areas for each individual lot. Previously, we were showing the combined easement area over all the lots. So we've since revised the plans to show the actual area that's impacted on each individual lot as requested.
Okay. And here, whether or not you should have a performance guarantee, I think we always have those.
Yes, and we added the note reference to a covenant on the sheet one of the plan.
On a center line?
Right, that's the staking. You covered that one?
And we've covered access.
Yep. I actually have a copy of that letter for the board, and one for the applicant for transparency purposes. So this letter, Paul, if you would. If I may. This letter is dated 2009 from the Falmouth Planning Board, and it's a release of bond for the Old Bayberry Lane subdivision. Again, this was May 6, 2009, and it says, it's a letter addressed to the town clerk, and it says, at a meeting on May 6, 2009, the planning board voted to release the $6,000 bond being held by the town of the above-named subdivision for the completion of the road construction on Old Bayberry Lane, Avalon Drive. The road is sufficient as per the road profile plan of 4894. So the planning board back in 2009 indicated access was done, construction was done on Old Bayberry.
So there are no more access issues.
Not that I see.
Okay. Next up, sight lines. If adequate sight distance was demonstrated, according to the Mass Highway Design Standards.
Did we jump over a couple of them?
Item 29, I think we jumped over.
Okay.
So we just covered number 26.
Yep.
And then 29 was the easements.
Which we did.
This is an additional comment on the
Right.
easements. So the regulations state that the easement should be centered on the property lines where practicable. And what we're proposing to do with this one here is we were trying to balance the easement areas on each lot, so they wouldn't have a impact on development. So we're proposing the easement area on the left side of this property line and on the right side of this property line to kind of balance it out. It's not entirely centered on the property line, but it is parallel with the property line here. And obviously, the drainage easement would need to be large enough to accommodate the drainage basin. In this location down here for the sewer and water easement, we're not running it centered on the property line because it's not really an ideal location for that easement. The utilities should be run in a straight line, especially the sewer line. So in order to create an easement centered on the property line, we'd have to add manholes and bends in the water and sewer lines, which doesn't really make sense from an engineering standpoint, which is why we're proposing it where it is.
What other infrastructure will you be putting in there?
Just water and sewer.
No electricity?
The electricity will come from Old Bayberry Lane and off of Lewis Street. So the only reason for this easement is the water and sewer line.
So electricity is separate. What about a gas line?
Gas will come from Lewis Street here and serve the subdivision. I'm not sure if gas is available for this lot or not.
Okay. Now, site distance of the proposed road not included.
I have a question on
Oh,
that.
Pat,
Utilities, does that mean that the electric lines are going to be above ground? So you'll have poles?
We're proposing the electric to be below ground.
Well, it should be.
Right, so we're proposing one pole, I believe, in this location here, in order to run it overhead to the pole, then underground from there.
and then there'll be a box put at each lot?
Yes, at the corners, there'll be some transformers throughout the site. But the electricity will run off. Usually they're positioned on the lot corners.
Are there any issues with the easements as presented? I don't think that the regulation specifically indicates that a waiver would be required. My reading of it is simply that it needs to be shown, and it needs to be shown at least 20 feet wide. So I think, provided in my review, is that they meet the requirement.
That makes sense.
Okay. Okay, now, the site distance for the roads.
So in our latest revision, it's not on this plan here, but we provided a site distance detail in accordance with the town's requirements. The town engineer provided me a link to the town's website to show how they require the site distance to be depicted. And we've submitted that on the revised plans on, I think, sheet 8. I don't know if Jed can pass that around, or if you
I
want to
did
just
not.
wait till the next meeting to discuss that. But we did add the site distance to the plan as well.
Okay, so that was 30. How about 32, about the super elevation of the cul-de-sac?
Right, so in order to convey the runoff from the roadway to this catch basin located at the end of the cul-de-sac, we're super elevating the roadway to one side so that the stormwater collects in this drainage basin. If it was a crowned roadway, you wouldn't be able to get that pitch to the basin. So as the town engineer responded that it's somewhat of a typical design for a cul-de-sac in regards to stormwater.
So it would be sort of tilted up on that corner and bermed up to meet it?
So the roadway will have a 2% slope in one direction as you come around this curve. So it'll be sloped to the gutter line on this side of the cul-de-sac, and then flow to a low point to the catch basin. In this area here, you'd have a crown down the middle of the roadway, and you'd pitch each side approximately 1% to the gutter line. So you have 2 catch basins here, one on each side. But as you come around to a cul-de-sac, we're pitching the road, the way to one side, so it can be collected from that catch basin.
Okay. Number 34, a list of waivers.
So we added a list of waivers to the front sheet. As of right now, the only waiver we're requesting is to increase the length of the dead-end roadway from 500 feet to 580 feet. And we're not requesting any other waivers at this time.
Could I just ask you, Jed, how common is it to increase that 500 feet?
Very common. Yeah, so my understanding is that the 500 feet measurement is sort of a rule of thumb, and it dates back quite a ways based on the amount of fire hose that the fire department had at its disposal at the time. Those things have changed, and, you know, the fire department has indicated in their referral that they don't have any issue with the proposed design. So I certainly don't have an issue with the length of the cul-de-sac. I do think it's worthy to just talk about how to measure the cul-de-sac. I think we talked about that at a previous meeting. It's come to our attention that it should be measured from the middle of the circle to the end of the street. So your actual measurement is likely going to be shorter.
500.
Yeah. So you may not actually need the waiver.
Right.
So perhaps at the next meeting, we could have a revised plan set that just shows that sheet indicating that length.
Right.
Jim?
I have a question. There is another important measurement of the length of the street. It has nothing to do with the fire department. It's how many lots you get for zoning.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is this waiver that they're asking for giving them an additional lot, or could they get the lots required from the 500 feet? Because it's the length of the street and the cul-de-sac, all these lots are measuring either 60 or 100 feet off that road. You make it longer, it gets some more houses on it. I'm wondering, is that, what's going on with that measurement? Did it create an additional lot, or if they stay at the 500 feet, or they get the 11 lots? That was where I was trying to focus on, that issue.
So my understanding is the answer is no, they did not get an additional lot, but I would defer to the applicant on that question.
Yeah, so we still have frontage for the same amount of lots based on the linear feet. By increasing so I don't really know the answer right off the top of my head, to be honest with you, what it would create if we had to reduce that. But as Jed was saying, we're not actually requesting a waiver anymore, since the length of the roadway is actually
Well, if it meets the road, my question's moot. That's.
Right.
Exactly.
But
Yeah, I'd have to.
I have been asking the question for that reason. I'm trying to find out why.
Yeah, it's hard to go back and reduce it, then see how many lots we would get after the fact.
Well, if
we
any
could
of them
make it
have
work,
60
yeah.
feet frontage exactly,
Yeah,
and you make the road 1 foot shorter, guess what? You have a problem.
right, but the first lot has well over the required
That's what I'm trying to get at.
frontage,
I
yeah.
didn't do all the
Yeah.
measurements, but
We'd have to go back to the drawing board and
I'm asking you why
yeah,
you're asking, why you're doing it if you don't have to.
right.
That's my question.
Initially, our first design, we weren't requesting it because most towns calculate it to the center of the cul-de-sac. But a discussion at our first hearing was that it should be calculated to the end of the right-of-way straight through the cul-de-sac, which is why we went back to requesting the waiver.
Who resolved that, whether,
We did.
okay, which is it?
Center.
Center.
And then by reducing it, they comply with the 500 feet.
So we don't need the waiver.
So our intent
Okay.
was originally to comply with it, but we
Sorry.
found out that we may
I
need.
answered my own question by bringing up that number.
And when I say reduce it, I mean reduce the measurement shown on the first sheet. Do you mind just going to that so everyone sees what I mean?
Yeah.
So the cover sheet shows a measurement, a dotted line, through the center, and by reducing that actual line to the center of the cul-de-sac, which is shown by the cursor, it will show 500 feet. So the waiver will no longer be required.
So that cul-de-sac is 120 feet across? It's 60 feet from the center to one edge?
80 feet from the center to one edge.
Ah,
Big.
big, right.
And it really isn't the length of the street at that point, it's the width of the, you know, as what you're driving. But anyways, I want to know for my own personal reasons, because I try to look at pieces of land and how you do it. And I was wondering how, I think if it's 500 feet, it's a moot point. Done.
Do the abutters have any comments or questions? Please, come forward.
I had several, you want me to?
Yes, please.
Phil Lewis, I'm on the corner of Thatcher's Lane that ends into the proposed subdivision. Just had a couple of questions. So on the town meeting agenda, it says definitive plan. So is this the definitive plan right now that we're discussing?
Yes.
Yes.
And then there's gonna be a second meeting coming up
No, this is it.
to address all the changes that,
Oh, yeah, it'll be continued to the next available meeting.
okay, to follow up on the changes and all that stuff that you guys were discussing. Okay, and then you mentioned there was a new environmental impact statement. Is that already available on
It
the
is.
town website, or?
It is not on the town website, but it is in the project folder, so anyone who wants a copy of that can come by the planning office and get a copy.
Okay,
Or
just,
email us and we can send it to you.
okay, just ask for a copy, okay. All right, so, because it said on there that has to be a date for the filing of the definitive plan. So is that just today because we're having the meeting?
No, if you look on the agenda, it has the date, it was filed on May 14th.
Right. And then last meeting says October 22nd of this year.
So, right, we have a certain amount of days to hold a public hearing, and because they did not file a preliminary plan first, we have 135 days to make a decision.
But we've had this meeting, so,
So you have 135 days total, and if we need more time, the applicant can ask for a deadline extension.
okay. But by having this meeting, it fulfills that requirement.
So that's the deadline to make a decision.
Oh, the final decision.
Yes,
I see.
yes.
But they can propose.
They can request to extend
I
that
got
to
you.
a later
Okay,
date.
so let me just get to my specific questions. Some of this is related to the actual construction process, so just wanted to know what the plan is for safety and just the plan for the construction vehicles. What routes are they gonna take? What roads are they gonna take? There's several, my son included, with special needs. So we have, and I'm right on the corner of 28, so construction vehicles coming off that road. There's a business right across from us. And, you know, the special needs bus backs into a driveway. So if somebody's coming down the street or coming off 28 real fast, what's the plan to, you know, take care of those kind of situations? So there is another family on our street as well with special needs, so maybe we'll step aside and let you answer as we go back.
Yeah, so there's two different access points to this site. They can either come in from Acapesket Road to Lewis Street, then down Thatcher's Lane. So obviously there will be construction vehicles driving down there to access the site, as that's the only way to access the site. As far as
But they
safety.
can come down Thatcher's too.
Right, correct, yep.
So is there a defined location that they have to take?
We don't have one at this time, but if the board has a preference on making that a condition that they have to access from one side, that's an option. We can also do some signage, some safety signage out there as well.
Because once you come out 28, there's, 20 feet, and it's our driveway, so.
Right.
Okay, I guess that's just something for
Well,
you all
you're
to
s-
decide later.
You're saying 28, are you mean Acapesket? I'm
No,
confused.
Route 28,
Yeah,
and Thatcher's Lanes tees into that.
okay.
The other side of Thatcher's is the entrance for the cul-de-sac.
Where's Thatcher's Lane coming into here?
I'm gonna bring it up on the
It's
GIS.
right here.
Way up?
It's right there where the arrow is.
So, but, okay, so they're coming from 28 to Thatcher's to the site, okay.
Do you want it on the GIS?
I believe I know, I was confused when he said Route 28, now I know what he's saying.
not
The other end of Thatcher's, yeah.
It's a couple blocks
Okay.
from 28 to the entrance to the subdivision.
So, right here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
okay,
is,
so you're saying that,
this is the subdivision,
yep.
this is Thatcher's Lane, and this is where he's speaking.
If I may, I would suggest that perhaps we consult with the engineering division on which access point would be best, especially for construction vehicles. We all know East Falmouth Highway is pretty busy. Acapesket intersection is extremely busy, so we just want to be careful on determining which one would be best to see if they have an opinion on, the impacts of that. And we can report back at the next meeting.
It's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Something that we need, I think we need to think about and make
Certainly.
a plan for. Let's see, are there any modification plans for Thatcher's Lane as far as widening the road, sidewalks, putting curbs in, anything like that?
Not if I may, not associated with this application, and I'm not aware of any with the town either.
So on the plot plans that you have here, they list Thatcher's Lane as 40 feet wide, and I personally measured it, it's around 20. And then also for the entrance to the cul-de-sac, it says 60 feet. So is the entrance to the subdivision actually going to be 60 feet? And I guess I'll let you answer that.
So what you're referring to on the plans is the right-of-way width. It's the width of the property lines for the right-of-way of the roadway, which is 40 feet. The actual roadway itself is within that right-of-way paved area.
Okay.
I think that's what you probably measured.
Okay.
It's not the
So-
right-of-way.
So you're gonna say you're gonna increase, the road is gonna be 10 feet bigger than Thatcher's right now?
No,
No.
the right-of-way.
Okay, because you say, like here, that Thatcher's is 40,
It is.
and then the entrance for the subdivision cul-de-sac is 60.
Right, the town requires any entrance that abuts a residential property or another property that's not part of the subdivision for the right-of-way width to be 60 feet for the first 200 feet, which is why the right-of-way is 60 feet. The roadway itself is only 22 feet wide.
Okay, so it'll be the same?
Right.
Same size? Okay. Just a few more questions. Will the subdivision road be a private street? There's Lewis Street, which is private. Thatcher's kind of dead ends into Lewis, and then there's that. So I just was wondering what the situation is. Is Lewis Street going to become a town street?
So we're not proposing any changes to Lewis Street. Our proposed roadway will be private.
So it'll have your own street name,
Correct.
and that'll be private. Will be gated. Just wondering what the town had any plans for Lewis Street, as far as changing the status, or
Not that I'm,
how that access is for them to, cross into the, I don't know, are there any issues with that?
not that I'm aware of, but we can check with the engineering division to see if they have got any plans for construction on Lewis, and we can report back at the next meeting. But I'm not aware of any.
All right, I guess that's all the questions I have, thank you.
Right, we have a further questioner?
Joe Baker, 56 Old Bayberry. Are there any, during the anticipated construction, is there any anticipated use of construction vehicles coming down Old Bayberry as a matter of routine?
Only for the development of that house. So when they start to construct that house, there will be construction vehicles traveling down that to access the lot to build the house.
Okay, so other than the electric that's going to feed that house,
Right.
basically, and the construction vehicles for that lot 11, I guess?
Right, yep.
No other,
No, there shouldn't be any need for any construction down there other than to build the house itself.
okay, and no other anticipated changes to Old Bayberry?
No.
It's gonna remain a sleepy, 16-foot wide, dirt pothole-filled lane
Another neighbor.
with another there. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? One more.
I did. Diane McElroy again. So my concern is that it is a rough road if you've ever driven by there. We had to have ambulances and other emergency vehicles come down there. It also raises a lot of noise and dirt. Are there any kind of sound barriers around the neighborhood or hedges or anything that would sort of try to mitigate that constant,
You're talking about Old Bayberry?
yeah,
Yeah.
from there? And then also, if the trucks are coming up and down, and there's already a house being built there, so we know about that, the potholes are getting just deeper and deeper. Is there any way we could just request, as those heavier big trucks are coming up and down, that they just at least dump some gravel or something so we have no drainage, we have no anything on the side, it's not,
It's a
neighbor-
private road, isn't it?
Hmm?
It's a private road.
right.
Right, so I think it's something that the abutters need to take care of, is that right? Jim?
Yeah, I think if you ask the DPW, they do occasionally grade private roads.
Yeah.
If you give them the reason why you want to do it, sometimes they bring the grader in there and they grade it for you.
Right, and we've done that, we've done it on our own too, it's just hard to keep up with. Like I said, we have 5 or 6 truck trips coming up and down now because there's a house already being built off Old Bayberry. So now there's gonna be another one, that's gonna double up on the number. And it was extremely long and slow for an ambulance come down, the one time we really needed it.
Want to come forward?
Cindy Rappa, 39 Thatcher's Lane. I have the same concern as Phil. Thatcher's Lane is a very narrow street. You can barely get one car to go down through there. I don't see how these 11 homes are going to be passing by all the time. Was there any consideration for another entrance to that subdivision lot off at Cape Set? Any other considerations for getting into that subdivision lot, other than through Thatcher's Lane?
So there's only one way to access these lots, which is off Lewis Street and Old Bayberry Lane.
There's nothing down off of Cape Set that you can,
No.
Could I ask you a question? Has Thatcher Lane changed any since 2009? Is it the same road, the same width, the same surface it was then?
I've only been there 4 years, so I don't know.
Patches is public.
But it's a narrow road.
It
I mean,
hasn't been repaved.
No,
You
so
should
it's
bring
the
it up.
same.
Yeah.
So it must have been the same at the time that access was approved in 2009.
That was for Old Bayberry,
Oh,
Not
so
Thatcher.
not Thatcher.
correct?
Well, if the board is making, we're going to make site visits, maybe we should just look at it.
Well, people can also access the site going down Acapesca and up Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just Thatcher's Lane.
That's the way I would go in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use Thatcher's Lane.
So there's 2 access
But
points.
Bob pointed out Thatcher's Lane, it shows a public road,
Shows
the
it
plan.
as public here,
not
not
private.
private.
So
Lewis is
you could
private.
get it paved, you
Yeah,
could go to the
Lewis-
town.
Lewis is private, but
Lewis is private.
Thatches is public. So,
But as for getting to the subdivision inside the development, you can come down Acapesca and go up Lewis Street rather than just go on Thatcher's. So
how do
they,
you control that? Make Thatcher's Lane a one-way
right, I
out
understand.
to 28?
That's, yeah, that wouldn't be before this right now.
And you're still gonna get traffic out of the subdivision going up that street.
I think we should take a look at it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So what I would suggest, if Paul would be so willing, is once the center line is staked and everything's all set, just send the planning department an email, And then we can forward it to the board and let you know that you can visit the site and take a look at the staking.
Can I make one other point related to that? When you do go for a site visit, so there's our house on the corner of Route 28, and then there's a business right across from our house. Our house faces Thatcher's Lane. And that, you can see that property, people park just in the middle of the street. They'll just park right there. So talk about a pinch point, you know, with construction vehicles, the school bus, anything else. People just are crazy. They'll park in front of the street sign. They'll pull off 28 and they'll pull right to the right and park right in front of my tree by the Thatcher's Lane street sign. And then somebody else, there's a fire hydrant, and somebody's parked right in front of the fire hydrant. So there's hardly even one lane available for a regular car. My neighbor down the street from me, her daughter-in-law was in an accident because somebody at the business, she's waiting to pull out onto 28. A customer, just backed their car up right into her. Didn't even look. So it's definitely an issue, not just for access of the road, but also because of the business right on 28. So
Thank
please
you.
take a look when you go visit.
Thank you. Anyone else want to make a point? Sir, I think that you've got the open comments from us so that you know what they are.
Yes, I have the comments, yep.
Right, and they will be addressed in the packet that you have brought to us
Yes.
late. Paul?
I'm curious about two things. You made an effort to make these lots 40 to 42,000 square feet. But two lots, number 1 and number 3, have utilities on them. What's the finished size of that? Are there gonna be houses? There's houses on those lots, but the lots would be a lot smaller if you take out those utilities.
I'm not quite sure I follow you.
Well, the
The lots
first
will
one
be
you come in,
smaller.
lot 1. If you look at it, you've got, the wastewater system there, right close to Lewis Street.
Right.
And that takes up, looks like, half the lot.
Yes, it does take up a good portion of that lot, but it still counts as lot
So the
area.
owner of that property is going to own the wastewater system?
So the thought process on that is once the sewer becomes available for the town, that will then become abandoned. So that it will no longer require that leaching field. So then that lot can then be constructed. But it could be constructed at this point in time as well.
You have the same issue with lot 3, where the drainage is.
So the drainage system is way out back here.
And that's taking about half the lot size as well.
The drainage easement is,
It's on lot 2.
it's 27,000, approximately 27. I think that says 27. I can't quite read the screen. Square feet. That includes the entire area here. But it doesn't take up the portion where they can develop to construct a house here, here.
Is the owner of that lot responsible for that utility?
No, the homeowners association is responsible for the maintenance of the drainage basin.
The other thing, just curious, drawings 1, 3, and 4 are oriented, the north arrow going like to 2 o'clock. And all of a sudden, 3 comes around and you got it flipped around. And there is no north arrow, but you can obviously see what's going on there.
I'm sorry, I don't quite.
Profile?
Look at drawing 3.
Sheet 3?
3.
Sheet 3?
No, go back.
It's the road profile plan. So you took the road profile, and I
Oh.
think what you're getting at is you just reversed
Yeah,
it.
there, it's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
curious
upside
why
down.
that was done that way.
That was actually a comment from the town engineer. They like to see the road profile match the direction
Right.
as the plan. Originally, I did have it flipped,
At
but,
least you can put a north arrow on it going the other direction then. There's none there.
right, we could include a north arrow there. You're correct.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're gonna stop here for tonight and continue until the 8th. Is that right?
Would that work?
Is that
Yes,
okay?
Continue to the 8th?
Right, I think we just need to stake the lot lines. I don't anticipate any more revisions at this point.
Right, do we need a motion for that?
Yes, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, continue to
Aye.
8th? Good, so we'll see you on the 8th again, and you've left quite a stack of new drawings. Thank you. We're getting there.
Thank you. Have a good
And
night.
thank you for your interest. There'll be another hearing on the 8th. The hearing isn't closed, it's just continued. So if more things come to mind that you want to know about, come find out then. Or look on the website, or come down to the planning office where the full drawings are that are easier to see. You're welcome to all the information that we have.
So planning drawings are available to us?
Yeah, they're up on our website, or you can come into the office and look at them anytime. I can give you 11 by 17, like smaller ones to take home, sure.
So to answer your question, the hearing's ongoing. It's not one-night meeting. It's from when it opens a month ago till when it closes a month later. It's all the same hearing, not one night. You were focusing on one night.
Well, I was just wondering, to know
Understood.
the decision
It's still open, yeah.
has to be closed by the decision.
Right.
Decision.
We usually ask for an extension anyways.
This continues to what date?
8.
To the 8th now,
8th.
right? And right now, the full length of time would expire
In October, towards the end of
sometime late in
October.
October.
Right, so, yeah, as you know, they've asked for a extension of the deadline, so you're safe. You have plenty of time.
Yeah. There'll be time, there's no rush.
Thank you.
So, thank you, and thank you for your interest.
And that's real important. If we miss that date, it's automatically approved. Believe me. We're paying attention to that.
Thank you. You guys have a good night.
Take care.
Okay, John's back.
Now the fun begins.
Yeah, now, the second
Over
half
timber for a while?
here is we'll reopen the hearing.
Access, that's right.
Mr. Cod.
We'll be again considering the articles that the planning board is bringing to town meeting in November. And this is our second go-around on them for the hearing, second or third?
This would be the second.
Second. And Mr. Ahmed, I want to thank you again for all the time you spent on our behalf. Thank you very much on behalf of the town. And a lot of work has been done on Mr. Cod since then. So let's take Mr. Cod, and do you have it all? The new one? No.
We don't, so for clarity's sake, we don't have a new one at this point. The
Well, we
plan, right, that's still the original deadlines. So your hearing is still open. So if I may, just summarize
yeah.
the plan, if you will. So, because your hearing is still open, we would encourage you to take comments from the public tonight. And at the next meeting, October 1st, we will provide you a written list of all the comments that have come in with a response to each one of those comments. And
Not tonight.
correct, not tonight. And draft recommendations for you to consider, at least amongst yourselves. Then at the meeting of October 8th, you would then close the hearing and you would deliberate on any of the changes that you want to make. We would then draft final recommendations based on what you say, and we would submit them to the select board's office.
Okay,
Okay?
right.
So
So
tonight,
really-
it's really just taking more public comment,
More comment.
if any.
But something that we might want to do, I don't know who else did, to go through Mr. Ahmed's comments and see, do you agree or not?
Does everyone have a copy of that? We printed extra copies.
I don't have one with
Okay.
me.
So let me give you, Paul, if you would.
Does anybody else want,
Anyone else want the copy?
or do you have? Okay.
Yep, several pages.
Mr. one from the other day, or is this
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's one
Okay.
that we handed out last.
this one from last week?
And some of the comments came from Mr. Imet's general knowledge from long practice in the town, and others specifically from the troubles we all had with 545 and trying not to have that happen again. But I did go through it to see what it was saying, and I'd like to look first at the ones where remember, we can only have Mr. Cod apply in business zones where the sewer is, but in that area, there are several split zone lots. So at the front may be business, but the back isn't. And should we clarify that? Sure, we should. Is there any disagreement with that? No. Okay, next.
Well, what is the policy for split lots on use?
Well, typically, you would restrict the actual use
To
to only that section of the lot for which the use is allowed. But if you want to allow for the entire lot to be considered, because the entire lot technically could be considered in a sewer request before the select board, the variance requests, then we can add language to the bylaw, to the revisions that indicate that the entire lot would be eligible as a Mr. Cod application.
Would it make sense, rather than something that's so fixed as that, to add that to the things for which the planning board would have flexibility, so that they could consider a proposal to include the whole lot and think whether or not to do it for that particular lot? So it becomes, because these are really unusual circumstances, each of them, and consider the possibility case by case. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I mean, this one's been tough for me. I mean, I think the most, I'm gonna use the word honest, but I'm not sure that's the right word. But I think the most honest way to do it would be to clearly demarcate in a map amendment that those lots that are split zoned, Mr. Cod is only eligible in the B1 or B2 or whatever business zone is in the front. And so essentially, we'd be creating a line across the lot. Because I think that was the intent of town meeting. And I went back and watched the video, and I think the idea was to restrict it to those zoning districts, but only those zoning districts that have sewer. That being said, it's a split zone lot. We can certainly look at how many there are. And so that's why I'm saying it's tough, because you could go two ways. You could make the map amendment, or you could make an amendment to the bylaw itself and just say the entire lot is eligible.
I have a question on the interpretation of what you said. If you're measuring, for instance, so many acres, that the land, even though it's a different zoning, could go into the density measurement, but the actual use would be restricted but my understanding is that's the way it's been done in the past.
That's correct.
That the use has been controlled, but if it's an acre lot, it's an acre lot. You don't cut it in half and say, well, it's not all zoned that way.
Yeah.
And is that what you said?
Not in where I began, but that would be the entire lot is eligible. But then the question is, would you treat it as a split zone lot as a Mr. Cod applicant? So, for example, a lot that's split zoned, you could use the entire lot's acreage to calculate how many units you could put on there. But then, to your
You can only
point,
build them on the part that's business zone.
exactly, you can only build them on the front, because that's typically the business zone area. So in this circumstance, if you say the entire lot is eligible as a Mr. Cod, they would be able to not only do the front, but they'd be able to develop on the entire lot, which is not exactly the way it would be done in the past. So
it impacts
murky.
both density and building height.
Building size, really.
And if you squish it down and you can get more units, the only way to do it is make it taller, so.
They're still capped at 35, so it.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
I mean, so what I plan to do was try to give you an assessment of how many split zone lots are actually in the Mr. Cod district, to see how many lots we're talking about here. Because we could be talking about a handful. And so its impact may be minimal, if you will. But we could be talking an awful lot. I just don't know offhand. So I'd want to give you more information so
I
you
think
can
it's
make
quite
it
a few
informed.
of the downtown lots.
I think you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Bob?
Well, on this subject, I guess what I'd like to suggest, is the approach that Jed is suggesting. There aren't that many. Just take a look at which they are and think about the several and decide whether they ought to be in Mr. Cod the way they're presently mapped. Now, I believe that is some are. I think there may be some lots on the, I think it would be the north side of the East Falmouth Highway that may be larger, that go farther back. And again, I take a look at what we're talking about to help you decide. But keep in mind, we're talking about lots that are, properties that are on the sewer, only on the sewer, that are part of a property that does, in most cases, front on Route 28. The few that aren't on Worcester Court and so on are in business areas. And what's the goal here? The goal is to encourage more affordable housing. So I would encourage you to be more expansive in how you deal with these several properties than restrictive, because these are on the sewer, and I think that allowing the full development would in fact be consistent with town meeting.
Okay, so we'll take a look and see, but it could be that rather than a rule, just the flexibility to go case by case would be the most cautious way.
Yeah. I mean, we're just scanning quickly, and I'm not seeing a lot of them. So we'll put that together in that written response, and we'll give you an assessment of what that looks like.
Okay, the next long paragraph is the most complicated, I think. And I wonder if you want to address that, Bob. It would be, and it really goes to the issue of big, long lists that we have of uses. Do we really want that, to specify those uses?
I mean, I think it's a valuable addition. I can understand the perspective of removing it and allowing that flexibility, but I think what's important to remember, and this is just my opinion, that Mr. Cod is a by right overlay district. And the way overlay districts work is that it's a fork in the road, as I've mentioned before. You don't get to take a left-hand turn, go down the Mr. Cod route, and say, I want to scoop in some underlying zoning uses from underneath, if they're not specifically allowed in the overlay district. That's just not how it works. The overlay district specifies, well, you've got this available option, but we're going to bake in some rules here to allow you to do some other things, but we're going to specifically outline, typically anyway, what's allowed and what's not allowed, so that there's no confusion related to, can we scoop up a special permit use from the underlying zoning district and add it into this application, because it's not specifically listed as an allowed use. Now, your alternative is to go through each one of the business district uses and say, okay, well, what do we want to allow in the Mr. Cod district? What are some things that we really like, and what are some things that we don't want? And if, let's just pick on gas stations because it's easy. If you really don't want gas stations in the Mr. Cod district, you can prohibit them in the overlay. But that doesn't mean that the gas station can't occur in the business district. That can still happen because an underlying zoning district still remains. The overlay is, for lack of a better analogy, frosting.
But it won't happen on the lot that is now being used as a Mr. Cod lot.
So I think you could potentially do that under your multiple use clause. So if there's a gas station previously existing on a lot and you wanted to add residential to it, I'm pretty sure you can do that as a Mr. Cod application, but there has to be a pre-existing gas station there, right? So in your zoning bylaw, it allows business uses in, well, a lot of districts to have multiple uses on a property. And you can do that with certain caveats. I won't go into the details. But the point is, you could still do residential and combine it with a existing gas station. But you can't currently, in my opinion, build a gas station with residential there without getting into some really murky details about whether or not that's allowed and what is not allowed. So that's why we tried to put in specific information about what you want to see a mixed-use building look like. commercial, office, et cetera, on the first floor, you know, your traditional Main Street layout with residential above.
So you're saying really, if the goal, as has been stated, and I don't disagree with it, I don't think any of us do, the goal is more housing, a variety of housing, but particularly affordable housing, and mixed use, so it's a walkable, livable area, then we really should restrict those things that might be considered slightly noxious, like a gas station.
Right.
And this would be the way to do that.
I mean, it wouldn't prevent it, it would just prevent it in a Mr. Cod application.
Mhm.
So here's another example of, we want to do a little bit more research on what's exactly listed as an allowed use and how in the business districts, and then sort of give you, my vision is to sort of give you a table of all of those allowed uses so that you can say, yeah, we really like the idea of having offices allowed or retail of certain sort, but certain, I think a good example is your restaurants. So certain class restaurants are currently allowed as a special permit use in the business districts. So as an example, the current bylaw and the red lines that are shown, it outlines restaurants as an allowed use in Mr. Cod. So the argument could be made that all restaurants are allowed. What we would want to try to do is put in a little bit more specificity to say the restaurants that are allowed by right currently in the business districts, not the ones that are allowed by special permit. But again, we want to give you that information to make an informed decision because it's complicated. And I would advise that you articulate what's exactly allowed and what's not allowed, because it provides clarity for not only an applicant, but for practitioners. I think it's really, really important. And we're not trying to be prohibitive, we're just trying to be as clear as possible. That's all.
How quickly could you get that information to us?
Likely by next meeting.
Okay. Because we do have gas stations with apartments.
You do. Yep.
Mr. Cod is primarily on B2 zoning, right?
B2, B3,
B,
and BR. Sorry. B1, B2, and BR.
One, B2, yeah.
okay.
I can never remember.
B,
Let me look.
but fast food is only allowed in B2.
As a special permit.
It's only a special permit.
Correct.
So it's not allowed anywhere by right.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
So again, you'd have a situation where, you know, are you gonna allow fast food as an allowed use in a Mr. Cod application? If you're okay with that, then we need to know, and I would suggest we roll that into the language to make it clear. And I'm not sure how we would do that, if we wanna go through a list of allowed uses, or if we wanna just make a statement that special permit uses that are allowed in the underlying business zoning districts are also allowed through a special permit process. But again, you're getting into a process that you didn't want to have. You didn't want to have a special permit
Right.
with Mr. Cod. You wanted it all be by right. So
And we
it's
all-
something we've got to work through to try and figure that out.
Bob?
Well, I really appreciate this format and the opportunity to have a discussion. I hope it's helpful. So you have a business two property or a business redevelopment property, and you could have certain uses on it. Right next door, you can have a Mr. Cod project. You can have in these districts mixed use, so you can have a gas station in the B2 area, and you can have gas apartments with it, but at a density of 6 units per acre. We already have all of those special permit uses allowed, and they can be right next to where Mr. Cod project would be. I think the answer is what Jed last said. I think you should simply allow any underlying use that's allowed in the B2, in the business redevelopment, in the B1 district, to be the non-residential component of a Mr. Cod mixed-use project, but simply provide that any special permit use requires a special permit and make it from the planning board, because the process of going through a planning board special permit along with the site plan review won't be onerous, won't be unduly onerous. And maybe it should be the same level of difficulty of being onerous as any special permit is. But the result is that we have an opportunity to create more housing in appropriate locations, locations which the bylaw says are also appropriate for the proposed special permit use.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you're proposing to replace the list of permitted uses, the long listing of it, with a statement saying that the underlying uses allowed in the underlying zoning area, B1, B2, and BR, are allowed in Mr. Cod.
If a special if they are a special
they're
permit
special
use, the
permit-
planning board will be the special permit granting authority.
So it's one sentence.
Well, maybe you
Well,
could do it in one
maybe
sentence.
two. But that's the gist of it.
I just think it's so much, first of all, I think it's a good change. I think, again, the overriding concern is encouraging people to do multifamily housing on the sewer in these appropriate locations.
What's the reaction?
I agree 100%.
Mhm.
I agree 100%.
I agree 100%.
I do too.
So,
I do too.
let me just
Paul?
say, right, so
Paul, do you? Yeah,
Here's-
that's all of us.
really quickly, here's a list of special permit uses that are allowed in the B2 district. Adult uses, an airport, landing strip, pad,
Oops.
commercial accommodations, commercial shopping center of a certain square footage. And I realize, all I'm trying to do is just articulate that
That's what it would look like.
you got a funeral home that's potentially allowed, motor vehicle sales, service stations. And I realize that, you may not be okay with certain types of uses being in a mixed-use development. But this is the type of analysis I think that you should do, is sort of walk through this list and say, is this really what we want to allow? Because then an applicant can ask. And then again, we're into the situation where you didn't want it to be a special permit. And so now we've got to try to figure out what that appeal process looks like. Would that be an appeal of the entire project? I think it would. And that's something that you guys wanted to get away from. And so those are the types of things that we have to try to figure out before the next meeting, so that we can give you some feedback on what that might look like. Again, just playing it forward, what does that look like?
If it's a special permit, the planning board can say no.
Yes, but you're limited for the reasons. So again, that's information that's included in the zoning bylaws. So you have to have specific reasons for the denial of that special permit. Right,
Well,
so
I think
there's
some of the
criteria.
reasons, certainly, maybe many of the reasons, would relate to the purpose of the bylaw.
Certainly.
And the purpose of the bylaw is affordable housing and diverse housing stock for the residents. So that if somebody comes along and they actually do want a landing strip there, just to take something
Right.
ridiculous, but
Crazy.
whatever.
Yep.
They would have to say, how does it fit the purpose of this bylaw? That would have to, I would think they'd be limited by the purpose,
Somewhat.
only somewhat.
Again, you're really relying on the section 12 of your zoning bylaw, which is your special permit decision criteria. So included in your books, without, belaboring the point too much, you have certain criteria that you have to adhere to when you're granting a special permit. So for example, I think we went over this, a couple of weeks ago. The adequacy of the site in terms of its size for the proposed use, its suitability of the site, on and on and on, right? So those are your decision criteria when issuing the special permit. Not sure you can totally rely on the purpose of Mr. Cod for that. I suspect that weighs into it, but again, we'd want to seek legal advice on that to make sure that what I'm saying right now is true.
Or what we're all saying, let's
We
check it out.
would be
but
the
some-
board determining the adequacy, though.
Absolutely.
I mean, we could say that right there, not adequate. That's our
Correct.
call, right?
Jed's argument is that they'd appeal it and say you're wrong.
Again, you
No.
wanted to get away from a special permit process,
Right.
so we're trying to keep you away from the special
But if
permit
we
process.
had to, because of the underlying, we've already agreed that we might have to go special permit
Right.
for these underlying things. But the criteria, I remember a lot of views and vistas, but the adequacy, it'd be on the judgment of this board.
Correct. Correct.
But if we
Yeah.
wanted to allow certain things by right, and these are listed, couldn't we also then say at the bottom of that list, all other potential uses could be applied for under a special permit?
That's sort of where I'm headed, and make it clear so that you make an informed decision on what specific special permit uses you would like to see in a Mr. Cod application. So the question to the board is, would you be okay with seeing someone come in and apply for a motor vehicle service station as a non-residential component of a Mr. Cod application? You don't have to answer now, but the point is, would you be okay with that? And if the answer is no, then we should make sure that it's crystal clear in Mr. Cod that you can't apply for that use. But you could apply for, say, a Class 3 restaurant, which just happens to be a special permit use in the Business 2 district. You know what I mean? That kind of detail. And again, not trying to be onerous, just trying to be clear.
Well, if
Yeah.
you're going to come down, we're going to come down on the side of continuing the list, but making it more exacting. It is missing the potential of the basement,
Yes.
isn't here, right? Well, that's an odd oversight, and that was interesting to see.
Noted. Yep.
Right, so there's that. If we're going to go that way, it would have to be even longer.
Yeah, or you can abandon the idea of dictating what's on the ground floor, first floor, basement level, and you can simply just say, these are the uses that are allowed and which are not allowed, or just say, these are the uses that are allowed. And then you can let the market essentially dictate what an applicant says they want to do in a mixed-use development.
I guess what we're looking for, what I'm looking for from this, you've got a good argument about not creating something that's so open that it'll be appealed all over the place, is the flexibility to consider things that we in fact can't think of now, because we don't know how things are going to change.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the clause in the bylaw, which, presents somewhat of a, we'll just call it what it is. It's, in my opinion, it's an issue. That there's an allowable option to apply for a special permit for a use that's not listed in the use table, which closely resembles something else that might be. So the purpose of a use table is to say, this is what we want in that zoning district. To make it very clear, this is what we envision. But then there's this option to ask the ZBA to do something that's close to what is in there. I don't know that I've seen any history of sort of abuse of that, but that clause in itself is just troubling for me, because why set up a rule and say, here's what we want to see, but then have an option to see something completely different? It doesn't jive in my mind, but I'm a rule guy.
Yes, sir.
Nice to be here again. Peter Freeman, attorney representing Kimco, the owner of Falmouth Plaza. So I'm in agreement with the discussion that you've had. I like what Bob said, but I understand what Jed has been saying in terms of some more specificity and giving you flexibility through a special permit. But I want to reiterate what I said last week. Especially if you have an articulated detailed list of uses and then prohibited uses, we do need for this project to make clear that on the ground floor, parking is allowed. Parking meaning when it's required for the project, in this case, the residential or mixed-use project. Not talking about a public parking garage open to the public, a commercial garage. I don't think you need to deal with that, but if you do, that's fine. But we just need it to be specified one way or the other that it's, I wouldn't even call it a use because it's part of the residential project, but that it is not prohibited one way or the other, that first floor, ground level parking related to the project, the residential project, is allowed. So however you get there is fine, but that's the point I wanted to make on that.
Do you know that it is in the draft?
I'm sorry?
It is already allowed in the draft.
No, it's under a prohibited use.
Yeah, it's under B,
I'm
parking and
looking at
driving
B,
aisles.
not, you're right.
So that's one of the notes that we have for the next meeting, that you guys will be discussing all the comments that we got in, and what you want to keep and not keep. So we have that written down.
Okay.
And I have a couple of other things really reiterating from last week, but I'll hold because you'll probably discuss that a little bit, and if not, then I'll ask if I can speak then. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if I may, clarification, Mr. Cod is allowed as an overlay district over B1, B2, and BR.
Right.
But not B3, that was.
Correct.
Okay, are you, Jetta Melinda, are you looking now at Mr. Ament's letter? Because I'm just going through the paragraphs. Some of them are things that are, as he said, they're edits, and I'm sure you don't disagree with them either. They deal with being sure that if we use it, we define it, that kind of thing. And if it's already somewhere else in the law, we don't necessarily need to put it.
Correct, yes, yes, sorry. So you're referring to the three-quarter story, I think there's a descriptor of
The
consumer
total building height,
Yeah, right.
where there's a couple of different terms used instead of just a single one.
Yep.
Where references to federal law may be unnecessary.
Yep.
As long as we're clear. And then the part about the basement that we already discussed, so that yes, that's going to be addressed. The next one I get to that I'd like to hear your thoughts on is the non-residential component shall have no limit and shall be allowed in addition to the residential component, even if the maximum density residential density is included. So this would be like 545, where he had the density from Mr. Cod, but he was adding on a restaurant and this and that. And so what's your take on that?
Unknown right now, simply because I need to spend more time with the business districts and their uses to figure out if there's any other use, which I don't think there is, but there could be, because I find things all the time. Any other use that specifically limits the build-out based on the lot size, like commercial accommodations did. So commercial accommodations is a unique animal in the bylaw, and it's, you have a lot size this big, and you have to, you can only have a certain number of units based on your lot size. If there's nothing else in the bylaw that restricts a business use in that way, then I don't see the need for it. But if there are others, then I can see the value in having that. But I also do want to point out that the current draft and the red lines that are included before you specifically prohibit commercial accommodations as being a non-residential use that's allowed in a mixed-use building. So that's the current language as presented. If you want to change that, then obviously we want to cover that at a future meeting or even tonight. But the reason for that is based on this comment, is that you would essentially be using the lot size, and we've covered this before, using the lot size once, then coming back and using it again. And I think that the argument that's been made in the past is that there wasn't an intent at town meeting to double count in that fashion. That being said, I don't think there wasn't one either.
Right.
Right, so there wasn't a
What there was no mention of it.
Right.
In which you can infer whatever you would like.
So here we are,
Right.
right?
Pat?
When we're talking about the need for commercial accommodations, I do understand that because we've had a lot of closures of hotels, motels. But just like Mr. Freeman said, if you're going to allow commercial accommodations there, you're also going to need a lot of parking that we don't currently have. And that I can see as a problem.
Potentially, yep. I mean, generally speaking, in the downtown district, we'll call it less of a problem. because there's a shared parking opportunity, right? But there's an awful lot of shared agreements that we're discovering that we didn't know about.
Right.
So it's very difficult, especially considering the analysis that we just got through with our parking plan, trying to figure out, are there already agreements in place that are sharing a parking lot that we think is available? So there's an awful lot of research to do on that end. And likely people who have been around town a lot longer than I have already know that. But point being is that, yes, it would require more parking, but can we get away with it in our downtown? But then the contrary argument to that is, you know what the summer conditions are like. And so part of the struggle with this parking plan and the analysis that we have going on is that, you know, we physically see people circulate the downtown because they're trying to find a parking spot. So that's added congestion based on the fact that they can't find somewhere to park. So we're in this, you know.
Bob?
Well, I'd like to talk about commercial accommodations. As with those other special permit uses, you can have them in the Mr. Cod district as long as it's not Mr. Cod. You can have them in the business district. And that's where we need to have another hotel, and probably two would be fine too. They can be right next to residential use. And there's a lot of synergy, if that's the right word, I'm not sure it is, where the amenities to a Mr. Cod project could be shared with a hotel. And I think it being a special permit use, the planning board can decide what is an appropriate density. I mean, there are limitations on density, even for a mixed-use Mr. Cod project, in terms of building height and percentage of lot coverage and so on. It's not as if you have a blank slate here. And maybe the planning board decides that only 15 units per acre of Mr. Cod units is appropriate because there's going to be a certain number of commercial accommodation units. So I'd say let the market decide what's good, and then the planning board, by special permit in such a case, can make a determination. But I don't see any reason why that allowed use, commercial accommodations, a use that we actually would like to encourage, should be prohibited from being part of a Mr. Cod project. And certainly a commercial accommodations establishment needs some housing for the considerable staff that work at such a place.
I actually can think of a good reason why we wouldn't want to have commercial accommodations, as I didn't see that as being really the only thing that we would be allowing as extra here. Commercial accommodations is really another term for short-term rentals. And we already have an oversupply in town, according to what we've learned from hearings that we've been having in order to find a way to regulate them. And to say that we're going to use what lot size that we have, the space that we have, the development energy and money that we have on more short-term rentals rather than long-term rentals and long-term residential, I don't think that's what this law was intended to foster.
Well, I'd like to suggest that commercial accommodations, as we normally think about them, that is hotels, motels, real such establishments, as opposed to rooms rent to transient in people's homes, which I think meets the definition of commercial accommodations, but is a problem. They're a horse of a different color, and to suggest
One is
that
supervised and the other isn't.
they are very different, and particularly because hotels and motels have supervision, and they are located in business districts they can be in a
Residential can be
residential
anywhere, right?
district, by the way,
Mhm.
but we're talking now about the Mr. Cod district and the business district. It's a good place for that use, and we've lost a lot of motel and hotel rooms in recent decades with not very few new units produced. And again, it's a special permit use. The planning board can make a determination and condition. And certainly if you're concerned about provisions in the bylaw that apply to special permits, just make it clear that all requirements of a special permit in the underlying district will apply.
Oh,
I think basically what we're trying to do is have a by right use.
Yeah.
And that's really what we're trying to do.
right.
So we're putting a lot of complications in this that may or may not achieve that purpose.
Right, if they all turn up needing special permits, we've really gotten nowhere.
And there's also the complication about technically the underlying zoning district, not in all cases, but in most cases, allows the zoning board of appeals to issue the special permit. And now you're effectively taking that ability away from them in a Mr. Cod application. So there's complications there that we would want to make sure that we've gone through carefully with town council to make sure that we're not creating something that's not sustainable or that creates some sort of issue that we're unaware of.
Hmm?
So just want to bring that.
Mr.
Just
Freeman?
a quick thought on this discussion. It's not germane to my client's project, but, you know, I appreciate the discussion. It seems to me as though, to address your concern, you could limit the type of commercial accommodation that you could issue a special permit for within the Mr. Cod. I mean, you could define it as hotel, motel. I don't think there's any reason why you can't add that definition. So it wouldn't be opening it up to, as you said, transient or the short-term occupancy. I'm pretty sure that that's perfectly legal, and then it would achieve, I think, the goal of, as Bob said, you know, revitalizing areas, because hotels and motels can be, I think that is a good word, synergistic with the other types of uses that are clearly going to be part of Mr. Cod.
Any other reactions from the board? Jim?
I understand the short-term rental issue has got everybody up in arms, but the reason why I always thought this way, that we allow accommodations, commercial accommodations anywhere in town under a special permit, is because we're a resort community, and this is where we have to have them. So it's almost like we're backing ourselves. Why, when we allowed that, I always thought that accommodation was allowed, even in residential zones under a special permit, because we are a resort community and you need to have places for people to come and stay in the summertime. It sounds like we're saying we don't need that anymore and we want to stop that from happening, and we're using, it just seems like, I thought that the short-term accommodations was something we were talking about in a residential zone. That's what we were dealing with, single-family homes. But now we're saying it, you know, now it's gonna interfere with our business zones too.
So I think that this bylaw was created, and tell me if I'm wrong, that's totally fine, to encourage housing for people, not short-term rentals for the community, for the tourist community. It was for housing. So if someone wants to put a hotel there, they can. They have an option. They can go that way or they can go this way. So if they want to put a hotel in, they can. But if they want to do the housing year-round, then they go the other option. You know, like, so they do have their options. It's just putting them together. It doesn't necessarily have to work, or it does work. So, like I'm saying, the bylaw was created for housing, for year-round housing, not for the tourist or the community, the short-term community. So, I mean, I think that's something to think about when you're thinking about the commercial accommodations portion of the special permit uses.
Right, if people want to build a hotel or a motel,
They can.
and they have control of the lot and the money, they can do it.
And I think it's worth stating, yes, I do think they're synergistic, to use a term used tonight, next to each other, but on the same lot, only because in your bylaw, it says a commercial accommodation can only occur on a lot size of a specific size when you have this calculation, this very strange calculation of determining the number of rooms, and you're using the lot size to figure that out. Then if you're combining it with something else, you're saying, okay, well, I've taken the lot to create the number of units that I would normally be allowed. Now I'll just move that to the side and I'll use the lot again and I'll add more to it. And the real question is not necessarily is that right to do, it's did town meeting and will town meeting be okay with that approach? And if they are, so be it. But if they're not, that conversation really needs to happen, because that is, in my opinion, the definition of double dipping on a lot.
Bob?
Just quickly, you don't have any problem with a mixed-use Mr. Cod project with housing and a 150-seat restaurant, which is not a very big restaurant. You don't have any problem with that. I assure you, a 150-seat restaurant at peak hours can create a lot more traffic than 50 hotel rooms or 30 hotel rooms or something that somebody would want to have, and would need just as much or probably more parking. I just think you're eliminating a use which is a good use, a needed use in the appropriate, area, and I don't see the reason for it.
Wouldn't it just be easier to add uses to the existing zones as opposed to having this overlay district that's going to conflict with the underlying zoning? It just seems like we're creating a problem that we really could fix by adding to the existing zones that we have.
Well, we've wandered into a problem that we weren't trying to solve. What we were trying to do with this, as I recall it, was started out, we were calling it multifamily housing.
Yeah.
And then the language changed. And now it's going to be affordable and workforce and regular housing. It's going to be variety of housing with a 25% limit on the affordable. So it was always about housing, but we wanted to have commercial things probably below, but not necessarily only below. That's what it was going to be. It was relatively simple. And now to have to consider each potential commercial use,
Yeah.
such as a hotel, one by one.
Getting
I
way too
think the answer
complex.
to your question, Bob, is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd give Mr. Cod the hook. Yeah, I just think it's complicating things unnecessarily.
We don't have any other way to get a density of up to 20 residential units.
Why
He's saying
not?
make 20 in the
Yeah.
business district, period.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just-
So you just amend the multifamily
amend the-
use and just add another category.
Make
Just add another
25%
category.
affordable, don't
20
tell
units
Mr.
for
Card, make
40,000.
it go
Yeah.
everywhere.
Because then multiple uses comes into play.
Is there?
Yeah.
Because multiple uses, your clause says you can have multiple uses on a lot in any combination.
But what about the affordability aspect?
Yeah, you would lose that affordability, potentially, unless you were to, I mean, it's something we're trying to get away from, but unless you were to mimic what is allowed in the GR district when you use multifamily use. So you can go up to 3 units, right? And then the third one has to be an affordable unit. We'd want to, try to tighten up some of those rules to figure out exactly what that means and how that gets applied. Yes, you would essentially, potentially lose the affordability component of your Mr. Cod district, but I'm not sure
We
you
could
lose
lose
it
our
altogether.
flexibility for parking.
You could put in some language in the parking section of the bylaw, and you could say in these certain zoning districts where, the planning board is the special, or the granting authority. I don't know, we could figure out a way, is my point. It's a little late in the process, but I think that's the cleanest way to do it, in my opinion, because overlay districts are challenging. They're just
They
challenging.
are. Wow.
I like the Mr. Cod bylaw. I always thought it was a good bylaw. I think it was misinterpreted. I think you intended it to be easy to deal with. It was supposed to allow mixed-use development with any commercial or institutional use, and there was another word in there, without limitation, okay? It got screwed up by how to deal with a special permit use, and a particular special permit use that Jed thinks there's problems with. I think you can keep the Mr. Cod bylaw, and a lot of the provisions, remember, there's a distinction between rental units, where you only need 25% to be affordable, and for sale units, where it's 50%. There's a lot of stuff in this Mr. Cod bylaw.
They all have to be rental units in Mr. Cod.
No,
Don't
can be
they?
either one.
What's that?
Either one.
Either one, but
Can be for sale.
can be for sale?
They
Okay.
can be for
50%
sale,
have to be
but then you
affordable.
have to have 50% affordable.
Okay, 50% affordable, okay, they
I mean,
get the
so there's-
25, all right.
You've done a lot of thinking, and I think it's really good. I think that the corrections just aren't that hard to make. Make the planning board the special permit granting authority for Mr. Cod. Clearly, you can do that. State law allows planning board to have a special permit authority. The selectmen have a certain special permit authority. You can, there's no question about your ability, about town meeting's ability to designate that. I think you can make this a better bylaw and address the issues. I, of course, have an opinion on how to do that. I've written you a letter that has a lot of suggestions. But I wouldn't throw it out and now start to figure out what changes to make in the business districts, remembering you're not applying this, well, you could just say any business district where you're on the sewer. Essentially, that'd be saying the Mr. Cod area. I think you've got what you've got. I don't think it needs a lot of changing to make it a much better bylaw.
Thank you. Okay, I've got more to do. Mr. Freeman?
And briefly, thank you. I do agree with what Bob said, and although I haven't studied all the provisions of the business districts that are subsumed under the Mr. Cod, but I think for a project like Falmouth Plaza and perhaps others, you'd have to really study all the aspects of the business district dimensionally, because the height would have to change. I think setbacks, you wouldn't have what you want with setbacks being actually promoting closer to the street. Perhaps the lot coverage, not sure about parking, but it's, as Bob said, it's really a lot simpler to make the changes that you've been discussing to the Mr. Cod, as opposed to really starting over and having to address all those different aspects of the business district. It's not just a question of increasing the density. So I advocate what Bob said.
Let's take a look at a couple more. Increased lot coverage. Another special permit.
Right, so, yes, and that's allowed by the board. However, there are some interesting requirements in determining that. Honestly, I'm not sure where they came from, but they're there, and so, yes, it is a consideration to allow for increased lot coverage. Again, if the board wants to allow for that. And maybe the idea is to get rid of, and totally understand, we just threw in the percentages of lot coverages for the parcel size just based on starting a conversation. So at 20,000 square feet or less, maybe a 90% lot coverage makes sense, and maybe a 70% doesn't make sense for over 20,000 square feet. Maybe you want to increase that or decrease the 90%. So point I'm trying to make is that we want to try to give you some examples at the next meeting. So to say, to Bob's point, here's an example of how it may not work, and then maybe we tweak it in this way.
Okay, then we're gonna look at 7.5G 5, about non-conforming structures and lots. What was your thought there, Bob? You're saying a prohibited redevelopment of an existing building that's non-conforming as to building height. It wasn't intended to, it wasn't discussed. This is saying it may be waived. Another special permit.
Are you, Charlotte, are you referring to the end of the first paragraph, 247.5G 3B? The abutting non-residential use, is that where you're at?
Proposed section, this is on page 3, halfway down. Proposed section 240 -75G5.
Got it.
Yeah. Would prohibit redevelopment of Mr. Cod under an existing building that is not conforming as to building height, and would have prevented, I don't see how. That would have, because, had there been an issue, there's a potential for a special permit for it.
Yes, because, well, so, again, I think that's a complicated case. And I don't know that we want to get into the details of it, but there was an existing special permit that allowed the use. And so, in my mind, there's some question about the permitting process, which I'm not going to get into. I'm just not going to get into. So, I think I've addressed that comment in the current red line version that I've got prepared for the board.
Okay.
So I think we've taken care of that.
Paul, did you want to say something?
No, I'm just thinking as well.
Okay, then going further down the same page, the parking requirements, I think we already can do this. The proposed parking requirements should allow required parking to be on another lot within 300 feet of a Mr. Cod building. We already have the flexibility to do that.
It was in there before, and we advised in taking it away. But, you know, we're flexible on if you want to keep that. And then I do think that there's, you know, some value to adding in some other criteria for allowing for that reduction, right? So it's not just shared parking, but it could be shuttle services, it could be a car sharing program, it could be a bicycle service. There could be a lot of different options that would allow for the board to grant the reduction based on the fact that a developer has created other amenities that would substitute a vehicle, basically, or a single occupancy vehicle. I should be more specific.
I think this is important to leave, because in my opinion, we're way over parked, and if you really want to consider affordable housing and having to have a car is crazy. I mean, if you can't afford a place to live, you can't afford a car. They need public transportation, they need to be in town, and to leave the developer flexible ways to provide share parking or service their needs is important.
Yeah.
To give the creativity to the developer to solve the problems, but just outright prohibit it, I think one of the reasons why we have flexibility in our parking is because we've known for a long time we require too much parking. We're way over parked. Doesn't seem like that way in July, but it certainly does in December.
Yes, certainly in December. Yep.
Well, and apparently year-round, having gone to the parking presentation, the town has a lot of parking spaces that aren't used, where we are definitely overparked. Right.
However, it's really important that we emphasize that although there's capacity, there has to be a shift in human behavior in order to maximize that capacity.
Yeah.
And the only way, in my opinion, you shift behavior is by forcing it.
Well, it was the consultant's opinion that we needed to make, it had to be a price incentive, so that
Correct.
we needed to reestablish some way of paying to park on Main Street.
Right.
And that would have a popularity of 0.
Right, so that's the stick, right? I mean, it's the only way to force, well, I shouldn't say the only, one of the primary ways to force human behavior shifts is by pricing certain things in a way that make them less attractive.
The other is the wayfaring, the new signage things that you're going to be putting up,
Yep.
making it easy to actually see where the parking is and to get to it.
Yep.
There are other ways to encourage it, but you would like to keep the requirement, keep the,
300 feet.
I'd love to see the solutions that people come up with, negotiate with neighbors, finding ways to do it, getting shared cars, buses, I mean,
That's the idea.
be creative.
And downtown isn't the only place that people
Yeah.
park cars.
Yeah.
Right, true.
right.
So this
Need
is
a
meant
parking
for
czar.
larger areas than downtown.
It's going to dictate everything.
So anyways, we've added that 300 feet language back in
So it's back,
for your consideration for the next meeting.
okay. Have you done something or are considering doing something to strengthen the language about the planning board being the permit granting authority under Mr. Cod?
Yes, we've strengthened that language, but only in a by right context. So we still need to work through how that language is going to come through as a special permit if you're essentially granting a special permit that the ZBA would normally grant in an underlying zoning district. So we need to make sure we're not stepping on toes and not creating any issues. So we haven't quite figured that out yet,
Well, are you talking about the politics of it or the law of it?
the law of it.
Good.
Yeah, we just want to make sure we're not creating any unintended consequences. It's a curse word.
I think it's important to be streamlined, not to have two different boards.
That's the last thing we want,
You know,
is
Right.
to
That's the
bounce an
reason for
applicant.
it.
Yeah,
That's got to be brought up as the reason, not that we're taking away from them, that the smart thing to do is have one board handle the whole thing.
I mean, conceptually, it sounds easy, but I didn't go to law school.
Well,
I think from time to
we have
time, the planning board
advice here.
has taken different things and given them to the ZBA because they were so busy at one time. I mean, that role moves back and forth as needed.
As long as, our town council is comfortable with, that type of language, that whatever we come up with, I'll be comfortable.
Well, I've been enlightened tonight. We're apparently allowed to do special permits as a planning board.
Certain
Oh,
ones, yeah.
I welcome that advice,
So you have the ability to do a marijuana treatment center as a special permit.
for example.
Is it possible that it could be stated that the planning board is a special permit granting authority in the Mr. Cod district, even for underlying?
I mean, I think we can say that. I think so. But I want to make sure, right? So that we're not creating any sort of unintended consequences by doing that. But that would be the simple solution.
Well, and the reason
Simple
being
statement.
is that we don't want to create, with the ZBA being the underlying authority and we doing the Mr. Cod, we don't want to have created conflicts that needn't have existed if it were one.
Correct.
That's a problem now.
Yeah, it is.
And then the final thing here
Yeah.
is the effective date and what it applies to.
So is that the last statement?
Yeah, the last paragraph.
No, I don't, Siri. Right, so I don't see how that applies, so I'd want to speak, with Attorney Ahmet about that and sort of walk through all that, but yes, that's on my radar.
Okay, good. Have we covered it all? Thank you. Thank you both very, very much.
If I may, sorry, just real quick. You did cover everything, but I just wanted to reiterate, although, I'll try to be here again next week, but the height, somebody had mentioned, I think you, Madam Chairman, it really is important, especially because we do intend to have that ground floor parking, and we need the density with the 25% affordable. That's really my specialty, affordable housing, and the economics are such that the 50-foot height limit, which I know is bigger than what is allowed now, higher than what allowed now, is just very important, so I just want you to keep that in mind. Coverage was also discussed. I made the point last time that for a pre-existing property that has a little bit over the 70%, we're just over 80, we don't want to have to go to your board, apparently, for a special permit. Probably a good chance it would be granted, but they need certainty for financing and planning to know that they could have a little over that. So just a reminder on those 2 points. Thanks.
Thank you for the reminder. Bob?
In the present Mr. Cod bylaw, there is a provision, I don't have it, can't give it to you verbatim, but that protects pre-existing non-conforming situations, like building height or lot coverage, better than what's in the proposed bylaw. So I actually think from my work for Kimco earlier, that percentage of lot coverage is even higher, considerably higher than 80%, but You have more recent information, Beaver, but I think it's, I would have thought it was well over 90%. And I think you should be able to, you shouldn't be limited to have to reduce the lot coverage below what it is. Maybe you can't go over it, but if you're getting an improvement, that would have been allowed under the present bylaw, but it's not clear to me that that's carried over to the new language.
I think we've got it all now.
May I
Good.
make a comment?
Yes.
Bob, you said you really appreciated the format that we had tonight, how it was so free give and take here. And I want to thank both of you for participating in this too, because it's a two-way street. I really enjoyed the format too.
Thank you.
It does make life a lot easier. Okay, we've got more of these. Accessory apartments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more that we need to be saying on accessory apartments? Are there any open areas? What we're looking at is what we had before.
Thought we reviewed this already.
We did. And if any member of the public had wanted to add to what was said, they were welcome to come tonight. That doesn't seem to be the case, but if any member of the board has had further thoughts,
I think it's good to go.
I think so too. It was brought into conformity with the state law. So we may not love it, but we're gonna have to live with it. And that would go for the next one over also, because this is just putting it onto our chart so people could read it easily.
Just put it in the use table.
In the use table.
So
Right.
this one's good to go too.
Good to go. Home-based business occupation. Further thoughts on this? Pat and I spent a long time on this with the consultants, with the two Bobs.
I think we reviewed this already.
Yeah,
We did.
we did.
Still
So,
okay?
Good to go?
So,
Looks like,
Okay.
and that would take care of the definition. Then there's the big sticky one, the non-conforming structures and uses. Further thoughts?
So, Madam Chair, if I may, so, as you remember, Attorney Ahmet had some comments at the last meeting. And so our plan is to do the same thing we will do for Mr. Cod, is provide a written list of all the comments that were provided, and then a response to those comments. And those responses will come from our consultants, Bob Mitchell and Bob Ritchie, who plan to attend your discussion
On the
next
8th?
week.
Yeah.
First, I believe. I've got to confirm which meeting I asked them to come to. I think it may have been the 8th. So that we can have a fruitful discussion about all the comments and all the responses and the potential edits that you might be making. So yes, it would be the
At
October
that
8th
time.
meeting.
So if everyone's content with leaving it till then?
Fine.
I'd like to focus on one provision of the proposed non-conforming structures, uses and lots provision. And this is language that was proposed when this came up a couple of years ago, and I think I probably had the same comments. And I think I raised this issue previously, and with a week before next meeting, I'll maybe find time to put it in writing. We have, at the end of section 240, 10.1, meanings for these important terms, non-conforming nature, and then what does not substantially more detrimental mean? And I'd like to first remind you what 40A section 6 says. It says, first says that the zoning bylaw shall apply to reconstruction, extension, or structural change of nonconforming structures. To provide for a use in a substantially different purpose or for the same purpose in a substantially different manner or to a substantially greater extent. Okay, it's a lot of words, sorry, but those are the words, and they've been interpreted quite a bit by the courts. Then it says, so first we know what is a pre-existing nonconformity and what essentially is permitted by right. What doesn't require a special permit? Changes that don't change the nature of the nonconforming structure, for instance. Then it says, pre-existing nonconforming structures or uses may be extended or altered, provided no such extension or alteration shall be permitted unless there's a finding by the permit granting authority that such change, extension, or alteration shall not be substantially more detrimental than the existing nonconforming use to the neighborhood. Okay. That is the so-called Section 6 finding that a Board of Appeals or the Planning Board, whichever is the special permit granting authority, needs to apply to an application to change a nonconformance. Now, what does the proposed bylaw do about that? It says that in determining whether a change was substantially more detrimental, this is the third line of this section 2, in determining whether or not it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, the special permit granting authority must make all the following subsidiary findings of relevant facts specific to a particular structure. And then it lists 3 items. The nonconforming structure or use must determine that the nonconforming structure or use reflects the nature and purpose of the structure or use prevailing when the bylaw took effect. Okay, it says the use or structure must reflect what was there. Next, it says the nonconforming structure is not different in quality, character, or degree. And then it says, and the nonconforming structure use is not different in kind or in its effect on the neighborhood. Where did those 3 tests come from? They came from the case of Powers versus Building Commissioner of the town of Barnstable, the seminal case in the 1970s on dealing with nonconforming uses. And those are the tests, verbatim from that case, for whether a special permit is needed, not whether a special permit should be granted. The test for whether a special permit should be granted is whether or not the special permit granting authority finds that it is or is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. So, on the next page of the proposed bylaw, it says for a nonconforming structure other than a single or 2-family dwelling, the finding that's required, then it repeats, then it gives us the language. Alteration, reconstruction, extension, or structural change, etc., may be allowed only on a finding of the zoning board that it won't be substantially more detrimental. But we've meanwhile defined what it means to be substantially more detrimental in that paragraph I just read. And it's creating a test which is essentially saying, and will be interpreted by the Board of Appeals as saying, essentially it means if you need a special permit, you can't get a special permit. That is, what it's saying is that the Board of Appeals in granting a special permit must decide whether there's a change in the use. Whether there's a change in the use, does it have a different effect on the neighborhood and so on. And that's not what the statute says.
Okay, I want to be sure I actually followed that. I understand your point. I want to see again where the language is. I see where the finding required, and the important part is not substantially more detrimental.
I'm going to give you a couple of examples of why this doesn't work. I'll do it now, or you can.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So, among other things, it says, that the board must consider, make following subsidiary findings relevant to these things, and then it says non-conforming structure or use, that is the proposed, is not different in kind and think about cases we've had in Falmouth. We had the casino in the Heights, a nightclub with I forget whether it was a 2,000 or 3,000 person occupancy. The place is a real problem. And by special permit, it was allowed to be converted to, I think it's 8 residences and an upscale dining area. That's a completely different use than what was there. We want to make sure we can do that. If we have a non-conforming nursing home on Main Street, putting Mr. Cott aside, we want to be sure that one could convert that to multifamily housing or to commercial accommodations or do something to deal with non-conforming uses and structures. There was a case, I have it here, decided in 2020 in Linfield, as decided by the land court, and it involved a restaurant that had been there forever. Lots of parking, a very big restaurant. And it was allowed to be converted to entirely new buildings with 23 residents in it. The Board of Appeals turned the application down. The land court overturned them. Says the test is it or is it not substantially more detrimental? And it went through everything, septic, parking, traffic, lot coverage, location of the building, so on and so forth, and made the decision that that complete change in use was not substantially more detrimental and could be allowed. And I think particularly because so many buildings in Falmouth are non-conforming, and many business uses are non-conforming, the Board of Appeals should have this flexibility. And using the test for whether you need a special permit should not be applied as whether you can get a special permit. I think they've used the wrong language. Now, I'm sure, especially because I raised this previously, I'm sure they have a response. That is, the consultants, the Bubs, have a response. But it concerns me because I know that the Board of Appeals will focus on that language that essentially says you can't really make changes. It has to be a similar use, or it has, and we need more flexibility than that, and it's been used very effectively and appropriately in Falmouth over the years. Thanks.
Jed, do you see where the language here prevents a change in use?
Yeah. I do.
And you'll be discussing this with the consultants?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, good. Anyone on the board want to comment on it? Is that what you said, too late?
No, I
Can
said
wait.
it can wait.
Can wait, yeah. Anything else we want to highlight? We don't know what you're going to come up with.
Well, so we're gonna go back and rewatch the video, because we do have a video of it, and we'll get any written comments that Attorney Ahmed decides to submit. We'll have those as well, if you decide to submit them. But we will put together any verbal
I'm
comments.
encouraged to do it.
You are indeed. This is good.
Yep.
Okay, so we've done what we can now for our articles.
So if I may, just sort of ask a process question for the board, because I think you have an opportunity to make a decision here, right? So we were anticipating more, interest this evening. Clearly, we did not get that. So the question before you is, do you want to hold a meeting next week, October 1st? Or would you rather just continue the hearing until your regularly scheduled meeting on October 8th and have our consultants come in at that point. Now, keep in mind, you have to close the hearing, deliberate, go through the recommendations, so there's a bit to go through. Or would you rather start the conversation next week, not necessarily make any decisions next week, but at least have a conversation about what your feelings are about recommendations, and then close the hearing on the 8th and vote them as such?
Well, there's a problem, because we haven't seen the written recommendations.
Plus,
So
on the
1 and
8th, on the 8th, we have 2 continued definitive plans as well, so it would be a lengthy meeting.
Right, I think it would be better to keep the, well, Pat, I'll be away, you're gonna have to do this, what do you think?
I'd rather have a little bit more time to contemplate, but we're crunched because of town meeting.
Well, we're definitely crunched, but it'd be better to be prepared.
Yeah.
So I think we'll go ahead with the meeting next week.
Okay. I think that's a good idea.
And get out of it
Well-
what we can.
Just wanted
Do we need a 2/3 vote for that?
2/3 vote of the board
Yeah.
for the recommendations?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No,
No,
Just
just
need a
a
majority
majority.
vote.
Because if Pam's out and one of us is out. we
Yeah,
might
I'm
have
not
a
gonna be
problem.
here next week.
Oh, boy.
And I
That's
won't be
two-
here, oh dear.
Oh, dear. That's only 4 of us who are going to be here.
We'll keep them,
That's enough.
it depends, yes, I mean, the October 1st is just a discussion about the warrant articles and the recommendations. You're not voting anything on the 1st.
So it
You
may be
would-
very short, then, is what you're saying. I
With
said that.
Um,
tonight.
Yeah, so October 8th is when you would close the hearing. Then you would vote your recommendations at that time. So is everyone going to be here on October 8th minus Charlotte?
Yes, it looks like.
I don't know yet. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, I see. Planning a getaway.
I guess I have to finalize some things, but.
Yes, you should.
We will
But
not
we need
be expecting Pam
Quorum
back.
at least.
Pam has resigned, we won't be expecting her back. So it's just us. -1 on the
6
8th.
members, yep.
So has anybody come forward to apply, because the selectmen,
Our process, apparently, the process we need to follow, that we've been advised to follow, is that we need to advertise that there's a vacancy, and give a time period, hopefully short, for people to apply. There is some interest in it, for people to apply. And then there's a process for selecting among the applicants, and I'm vague on that process. Do we interview them?
Yes,
Do
you would do
we?
it at a joint meeting with the select board, because the select board would be the appointing authority based on your recommendation.
Right. And then we make a recommendation.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So if you know of people who are capable, you think they'd be helpful, and it has to be advertised.
Let's get the ad done right away.
yeah.
That's a piece of paper filed with the enterprise 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I don't know the specific period, but my understanding is that the letter of resignation was just filed with the clerk today. So we need to have that in hand, but then, yes, the next step is to immediately post an advertisement.
Right.
Yep.
And she's,
What's the limits on timeframe?
So we have some complications, as you know, because we've got town meeting coming up.
Yeah.
So getting a joint meeting between the 2 boards may be challenging based on that timing, but I can work with the town manager's office. We can try to figure out what's gonna work best for that
Okay.
type of thing. We may have to wait till after town meeting.
Does that interfere with the advertising? Can't we just get the advertising out of the way?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay, at the application in, we don't have to announce the hearing, you
Right.
need to apply.
Yep.
So we get the advertising out of the way, so if we have to move, that's one less block in the way, we just do it. So I'm encouraging you to get the ad done.
Agreed.
okay. So we're going to continue this hearing.
Yep.
Until the 8th. Can we have a motion to that
Nope,
effect?
October
Would
1st.
anyone-
October 1st.
October
Oh,
1st, sorry.
you were playing into my wishful thinking.
I was.
So it's moved for October 1st.
Move for October 1st. Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing, all in favor?
Aye.
The hearing is continued until October 1st. Okay, this referral for public hearing, what is this about?
So, if I may,
Yeah,
this is a comprehensive permit application that's been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals. And in their process, as you know, they seek referrals from other town departments and other boards, you being one of those boards. This is an application located at 419 Wacoit Highway. It was filed with the ZBA, I forget the exact date, I think September 16th. Actually, the referral was received on September 16th. And as you can see in the referral, it is for 5 single-family dwellings, all being affordable, located on Wacoit Highway as shown up on the screen. So Melinda's gonna just run us through the plans, and the point of tonight is to get your feedback so that we can submit a referral back to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Why would it file with them rather than with us?
Comprehensive permit, all comprehensive permit, a 40B
Yeah, it's a
comprehensive
40B.
permit is ZBA.
from the Falmouth Housing Trust.
Yes.
So,
Can you bring this up? I tried to look at, try to find this. Can you show this on the GIS map? Has this been subdivided? Is that?
No.
Because the lot I thought it was a different lot. I'm
Yeah.
confused.
there's a house on it right now.
The lot, it looked like I looked at, went all the way down to the water, like that one, and the lot you're showing has been subdivided.
Not yet.
So that's a proposed subdivision as well?
Well, it's my understanding that they did subdivide?
Yes, they carved off the back end of it so that the state could purchase that piece of land. So that's
Have they
habitat
done that
area.
already?
Yeah, they have, yes.
Is that next
Do
to
they
the
need to,
Coit?
an A&R to do that?
Came through here.
We did it?
Yes.
I didn't remember.
Yeah, I know, it's been busy.
I just went to, I just went to, saw that, I said, that hasn't been subdivided yet.
Right, right.
See, I used this as a reference, and I got totally lost when I looked at that.
So did you want to see the street view to see where it is now?
I know it is, yeah, I know where it is now, yeah.
What's that body of water?
Wacoit Bay.
Bourne's
That's
Pond.
Wacoit Bay.
It says Bourne's Pond, nope,
No.
sorry, I got it wrong.
Okay.
Bourne's Pond,
It's the second Bourne's Pond,
Yeah.
The other one.
little brother.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just
that's
going-
why I was really confused. I had the wrong place.
So it's off Wacoit Highway, and this is have they decided if it's a right-of-way or a driveway, or road or a driveway yet?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, so it's gonna be either one, a road or a driveway, but it comes in off Wacoit Highway over here. I believe there's an existing curb cut here. They are going to be moving it over here. And then you come,
Which way's north in this plan? I'm really lost.
sorry, north is this way. Straight up.
So you know where
It's the other
vet-
side of the highway, okay,
It's on the side that Wacoit Feed and Grain is on.
okay.
Yeah, it's to the right off the little hill leading up to Monica's Cafe.
Yep. So you come in, and then there's gonna be 5 homes, 1 over here, 3 here, 1 back here, and let me just,
Can you go back a minute? What's the property to the right? No, right there. What is that?
the vet. I think it's the vet.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I think next to the vet is Feed and Grain.
Feed and grain, yeah.
So you would come in, they would park right here, right here, 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 and here. And there'd be a walkway right here. I believe at the site visit, they said that there would be fencing along the main road. Do you remember that? I think she said that.
Okay.
But I could be wrong, it's not on the plan, so. And then someone made a comment on the plans when I sent them out. Did one of you make a comment about being about being close to the road?
Right, I couldn't understand. It seems quixotic, an odd use of the land.
So-
Why are the houses facing the highway instead of facing the new road, sort of isolated from the highway?
Right, so it's my understanding that the houses, I'm trying to find if there's a better, so all of this is going to be vegetation possibly. So they're gonna keep a buffer area.
Yeah, I could see that that was their intent. But why not take the better solution of having the houses face the new little road? Then they've made a neighborhood. 4 of them are turning their backs on one of them. There's that part. But they're facing a highway.
So you mean face them this way?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but puts their backyard away from the highway.
You can make that as a comment.
Yeah, I think, what we heard from the site visit was that what they were trying to do is sort of extend the village, right? The feel of the village and all of the houses that, face the highway. So be consistent with what's currently there.
They're imagining a feel of a village, because it doesn't feel like a village.
Yeah.
It feels like a highway. And these people now are not even forming a neighborhood. These
That's fair.
houses, they're just missing an opportunity to make it a more pleasant way to live.
Are you writing down the comments?
yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting, there's gravel walkways up in the northern part of that too, not paved.
Right here?
Yeah, that's all gravel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
And they would still need that
These
buffer
are
on the
affordable
highway.
houses,
Yeah.
Yeah.
40B.
Yeah, it's a
gravel
housing trust.
walkways.
Because the design of the houses looks
It's
nice.
nice.
They- Yeah, they have a nice roof line, they have good fenestration, we say,
Gravel
windows. I
parking,
mean, it's
too.
just,
So you'd rather see
Parking
paved?
area is all gravel also.
yeah, well, that's okay, because they're trying not to make it, too
Yeah.
impermeable. So you can see why they might do that, but I just don't see why they're not.
I never thought
Differently
about that, but
oriented.
you're right.
Well, and you could do it. There's no reason not to do it. From the sides, all you have to do is take it and turn it.
Flip it.
The impact,
Turn
one of the
this one.
houses gets all the street access on one side, and the other two are not buffered by it.
Right.
It creates an unequal,
Access issue.
well, the frontage, I think frontage on 28 is kind of negative. Right now, it's equally distributed amongst those 3 houses, and you'd be putting it all on one if you turned it sideways.
No, not if you increase the buffer. So what you would do is, so you take these and you turn them that way. You take this one and turn it that way, and you increase this buffer. For one thing, the land falls off there.
Falls off a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So you'd have to do something anyway, particularly if you expect children to be in those houses.
What's the open area to the left? That
This?
white Land, what is that?
That's part of the land, I believe, that the state took,
Yeah.
that they subdivided and gave to the state.
It's open space?
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know what the state's doing with it, but
Yeah, there's, it's open space, but it's meant to, the future plans are to include walking trails down to the pond, and I think
That
there's
would
a
be
road.
really nice backyards. As soon as you turn these around, it's right in their backyard.
You could have one facing the highway and the other 2 turned.
You could turn them all to face the road. Why would you do that to this guy?
You want to maintain the village look.
There's no such thing there.
It's commercial.
No, they lost the village look when they straightened out the road.
I mean, I get it, as you drive down that section of road, I mean, it's a lot of residential, and obviously all the older homes are facing the road. So I think the idea was to just keep that consistent theme,
Yeah.
if you will. But,
They probably won't change it based upon our comment, but who knows?
You never know.
so I've got so far the orientation of the homes. Perhaps adding paved walkways instead of gravel walkways, but keeping the driveway or, the turnouts and the parking areas as gravel to, reduce impervious cover. One thing of note is, we mentioned at the site visit, so, as a resident of, let's say, those 3 skinnier homes on the left-hand side of the screen, you park your car in the rear of the property, there doesn't appear to be an obvious connection to the home at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a long way to go with
Mm.
groceries.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's an existing home there that's gonna come down.
That's right.
They use the same driveway, basically.
Ish, yes. They're shifting it a little, but yes.
I think it actually, the roofs would actually be better for solar, too.
Yep.
If they were turned. The north and south is the worst, east and west is the best for any solar roof, so you have a lot better solar application on those narrow houses. Because, you know, right now, half of it's gone, turn it that, I think you gain a lot more solar area, too.
That also.
Have them consider it, it's worth talking
Yeah,
about.
I mean,
Yeah,
I wonder what,
it is.
I mean,
They may have a good idea that we don't know about.
yeah. No, but,
There may
I mean,
really
they
be a
should be
village
building
there.
net
we never-
zero houses. They should be building net zero houses.
So, noting the parking distance from the homes.
No walkway.
Right.
How does it happen that the state has that land?
So it was an agreement between the trust itself and, I think it was DCR.
Who
So
owned the
there's-
land before the state did?
A private property owner who, you know, through a process with the trust and the state, you know, they came to an agreement and partnered on, I think they partnered on the purchase where, you know, a certain segment would be associated for the affordable housing, and the other part would be, you know, maintained by the state. There's some wildlife habitat in that area.
So the state put money into it?
I believe so, yeah. I don't remember the exact details, but vaguely, yes, that was my understanding. So a
Nice
nice
deal.
little partnership.
I didn't know the state lent itself to that kind of thing, that's good. Well, I didn't have any other thoughts about it.
Okay, so you like the architectural style?
I
Yeah.
did, yeah, did
With the
we?
exception of the siding on the diagonal siding.
Yeah, that was weird.
I mean, to me, for water resistance, you got water that, you create all these channels that run down, right down to the foundation. I mean,
Goodness, I didn't take that as siding, I should have.
Oh, I saw it, and I thought, this is weird.
It is. I thought they were just shading it.
So the other, I think you were probably looking at the other house,
yeah,
this one.
There's two different
Two
sets of
different-
elevations, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's just the sheathing layout.
On this one here?
So on one of these
It
is a
says
very
sheathing
basic
layout.
Oh, okay, never mind.
of
Yeah.
land.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay.
that's really weird.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, I was just at a guy's house this week, and all his siding is like that.
yeah.
Okay, so that's sheathing, not,
Yep.
okay.
Is that the same house? It's the same. So it looks like there might be another house up that's not on here.
And they're nice plans.
Yeah, so I'm not,
Those thin houses,
I'm not seeing that elevation.
right,
Okay.
so.
So one of the comments that, sorry.
No.
One of the comments that we had mentioned in our town comment letter was the option to create the visible nature of the structure, right? To allow for not only the resident who may or may not be in a wheelchair or disabled in some way, but also a visitor who comes and allow for access to the building on the first floor through not having steps, basically, and then wider doorways and first floor bathroom, those types of things. So is that something that you'd like to add in here as well, or is that?
I think whenever they can, they ought to consider the ADA.
How do you mix that up with gravel, walkways and things? I don't see how that's even
Well, it
say the
depends.
same sentence.
Yeah, it depends on the gravel surface and whether or not it would meet ADA requirements, because there are certain
There are
gravel.
gravels that are ADA.
Yes, as long as they're not slip resistant and they're stable and hard.
Okay, I
The
didn't think
one
they
that
could
does the
be.
siding.
Yeah.
Because it says that it's
Yeah, I know.
But
it's
yes, they're
concrete
challenging.
clapboard,
Those two things.
lap siding, yeah.
but I don't know what it is on the diagonal ones.
That's sheathing. that's
Really
underneath.
hard to read.
Yeah, we've come to the conclusion it's not siding, it's sheathing.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
plywood.
Why did they do
I'll
that?
just
No,
never see
they're
it.
not showing the siding.
Indicated that way.
But see, they labeled it
Oh, they did.
sheathing.
Ah,
We just misread it.
Yeah.
okay.
It's underlay, under.
I didn't see that
How'd
part
you
of it.
figure out that that was concrete?
Oh, it says somewhere, in
Clapboard.
very, very tiny
What, the
letters, I
clapboard?
think. Yeah,
On the other?
Hardy
Yeah.
plank, it's
Yeah, it's
called.
hardy plank.
That's,
Is that what,
That's
that's
concrete.
concrete?
yeah.
Yeah.
looks like wood,
Yeah.
Yeah, it
it's
does,
great
it looks
stuff.
good.
until you hit it with a
Actually-
ball or a rock, it breaks.
Oh, does it? So don't do it.
Yes, I would advise against that.
Yeah.
You don't throw the ball against the house.
Yeah, you
Don't do that.
don't play three flies out against the house.
Wow.
But,
So it's 9:20. Do we have more that we wish to suggest?
I mean, did we determine, I couldn't tell by looking at the floor plan what the door sizes are, but are they 210 doors?
I don't know.
What do you mean by 210 doors?
A 2-foot 10-inch wide door for wheelchair access?
Yeah, I think the first floor,
I don't look it.
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, we just do that as standard now.
yeah. So it looks like the access to the front door is through a step.
Yeah.
It's unclear whether or not what the door spacing is. I can't see a measurement there.
Yes, something that low, if they could change it if there's handicapped applicants, so, and we've had to do that.
Well, it's, probably we could just make a suggestion that they consider it.
Yeah.
Then they could make some changes if they want to consider it or not.
How many of these are three-bedroom houses?
I think they all are.
It looks as if they are.
I like
Well,
the design.
we have one design of a three-bedroom house in the back, but it's not like at least two of them here. It doesn't appear to be much like the others.
Yeah, I think the layout's different, but I think they're all three-bedroom, aren't they?
I think so, Charlotte.
Yeah, I'm gonna try
They're all
to,
affordable, right?
I don't
Ted?
give you the floor
all
plan.
affordable, yes.
Yeah, one looks like that.
That's what we want to see.
It's interesting going down for a buried basement, really you don't show elevations, but it's proximity to the water, that's a problem, isn't that big?
I think.
Well, it's up from the pond.
Yeah,
I've got some columns there with spread footings and everything, and yet the floor slab in the basement is just a slab.
that's 4-inch typical. Yeah. Yeah, they're requiring the displayed footings for porches now.
Yeah, see bedroom 3,
See, here they have footers here.
right.
so my understanding is that there's going to be 2 3-bedroom homes and 3 2-bedroom homes. So I believe
Oh.
the long skinny ones are the 2-bedroom,
Two bedrooms.
and then the larger square, yeah, right, those are the
I've
3-bedroom
been
homes.
showing all of
They're
them as
both
3
The two squares, yeah, me too.
And then the affordability ranges,
What, 100 and something percent?
yeah, so there will be 2 restricted at 80%, 1 restricted at 100, and 2 restricted at 120%. So there's a range of affordability.
Good.
These are the square ones.
Yeah, shows 3 bedrooms. No, it's also, look. And a basement. It's only showing the 3-bedroom interiors.
Yeah, I think the plan set that we got from ZBA may be missing some pages, because I've seen the elevations of the long skinny ones, and they're not included in the packet that we received, so we'll reach out to ZBA just to let them know,
Yeah.
or at least try to figure out what the issue is.
Yeah, what they are.
So do we make a positive referral? Is that what we do?
It sounds like it, so the comments that I've got thus far are orientation of the houses, paved walkways, parking area distance from the homes without the walkways. The architectural style seems
Good.
appropriate,
Yeah,
and the ADA access are the only
should be considered.
items, yeah. So, seems very positive,
And the price is right.
and the price is right.
Okay, then.
Okay.
Moving on. Planning Department report?
There's really not much to add since the last meeting. We're working really hard on these zoning amendments, so we're doing our best to, like I said, we're
Yeah.
trying to give you as much information as possible for the next 2 meetings so that you can make that informed decision. So it's been busy, but, staying the course.
Sounds solid. Committee reports. John?
I attended a 3-day seminar in Harwich last week put on by the Cape Cod Commission called One Cape. They do it once a year,
Yeah?
and it was very interesting. Had speakers from the Lieutenant Governor and Economic Development person for the state, as well as many other speakers, and a lot of the topics had to do with affordable housing and smaller lots and smaller houses and all the things that we won't do, but
Well,
sounded good.
right,
So like, the town of Falmouth, let's see, we decided to go to 10,000 square foot lots again. So we can get more homes.
right, I see why.
Talked about 400 square foot homes and things like that, so there were a lot of great ideas. And staff was there also.
We also attended, very nice.
There were
Yeah.
400 attendees.
Yeah, I've been to, I think, 2 of those, and learned a lot each time that I went. They were
Were you invited to this one?
No, I think we were kind of, but
We've been invited before, Pat, I went.
yeah,
The Chairman and vice chairman were
you can
invited
go
in
if
the
you
past.
want.
Told about it. I didn't want to go, I'm just wondering, I remember going,
Yeah,
as, not as the Cape Cod Commission, but as the planning board.
at the point I went is when we were really interested in form-based zoning.
Yes.
Right, and others were marginally interested, and nothing happened next. And it's given me that feeling about those meetings, but,
Okay.
yeah. So, Paul, any committees?
Now, the water quality meeting tomorrow. Update after that.
Okay, the short-term housing has definitely moved on. Our town council drafted a bylaw, the select board will propose it, and we've gotten some comments back, and some of them are interesting because some people who already are running short-term rentals say, well, they won't have to register because they fit under boarding houses. They fit under our definition of boarding houses, so they don't have to register, and they can just keep doing what they're doing. So I think some work needs to be done. That was by working from the definitions for boarding houses and comparing it to what was there for short-term rentals.
But the owner has to live there to run a boarding house. That's the big difference.
That is a big difference. But for,
They are a boarding house if the owner lives there. But if they're an Airbnb and the owner lives in Wellesley, that's a whole different story.
right, but for many of the, we'll just call them Airbnbs because it's easier. Many of the Airbnbs in towns are in fact owner-occupied.
Well, then they fall under the boarding house. I mean, that's a bylaw, they're already classified that way.
So therefore, they don't have to register?
I don't think, well, they have to register as a boarding house.
Right. A boarding house would be a special permit
Still has to
through the
register.
ZBA.
Is it? Uh-huh.
It's a commercial
Just a
combination.
different animal, but it has still,
The taking of borders is different. Right, so
Taking
there's,
them where?
well, that's a use. You can have up to, I think, 4 boarders in your house.
But not be a boarding house.
I believe so. Trust me, there's a lot in the zoning bylaw that I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
There are so many unrelated people that could live in the same house.
Right.
That's the way it's stated.
a lot of houses down by the beach, Falmouth Heights, Falmouth Village, they all had summer rent, they were full of them in the 60s and 70s. They were here.
Yeah.
That's what our town was.
Right.
May still be.
Exactly. There may be situations like that.
Paul?
Make a motion to adjourn.
A second?
Oh, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.